Hey everyone, it's me Luiz Estrela from Nintendo Everything, and today we have a very special discussion here on the channel. We are finally going to share our thoughts about the game that we are the most expected game from me this year, which was Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, of course, as always, in these discussions, I'm not alone here. I'm bringing again Nicolas from the sides, and Nicolas, as always, I like to ask a first question when you present yourself here on these discussions. And this one I think it's a little bit complicated, but you probably already have an answer. So Nicolas, please present yourself and tell us which one was your favorite hero from the game.
Oh, this will actually be a lot easier. So, I'm Nicholas. I'm a reporter on Nintendo Everything. I also participate in the podcast we host and that we have every week on the channel. And my favorite hero, I think, has easily got to be Ashira. There's so much about her in terms of her looking like a descendant of Ryan and Sharla, or all of her arts being references to Dunbands, and her Ascension quest being just amazing and adding depth. Ashira is definitely my favorite.
I think, yeah, I like her too. I think I finished the game with her actually, because she has an art with launch, and I like to do the combo with launch and smash. So I would often use her, or I use her class, or I would use her. And also she's great for chain attacks because she guarantees an amazing.
She's so good, yeah.
No, I like Ashera. I didn't do her Ascension quest. Is it any good?
Oh, you're missing out.
Oh.
It adds so much depth to her character.
I'll definitely do that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But guys, a disclaimer, a very important disclaimer. This video will be full of spoilers. So please, if you never finished Xenoblade 3, this is a place, or if you don't care about spoilers, there's no issue. But if you care about the story and all the plot twists and stuff like that, we're going to talk about everything here. We should also, we'll probably mention some spoilers for Xenoblade 2 and the first Xenoblade, so be aware of that if you never played one of those. We'll probably not go as in-depth as we'll go about Xenoblade 3, but we'll also probably mention, because as it is pretty obvious right now, those games are connected. And okay, with that disclaimer, I just want to add that my favorite hero is probably Nia. And I know this is kind of cheating because she's a post-game hero. But man, I just loved her new design and her arts, and the fact that she has the Aegis' sword on her back. I just think it was a great touch. I also really liked Miyabi, because just to mention a character that is in the actual main game, I think Miyabi, I really liked her whole stuff, her stuff with fasting, the charging of the arts, so I used her a lot during the game, and she's also a great healer. So yeah, Miyabi was also great. Alright, we already mentioned the heroes, and I think we will not have a very hard structure to this video. It's more of a natural conversation, so just a disclaimer for you guys to be aware of that. But I think we should start talking about our first impressions with the game, which was a way back right now. It was like a month back. So I want us to reminisce a little about our first impressions. So Nicholas, when you played the game for the first time, when you watched the first, the first chapter, I should say, what were your first impressions of the game?
There are a lot of tutorials.
Yeah.
There are a lot of tutorials, and I love that. I do think they may have front-loaded it a bit too much, but it still ended up making the experience very pleasant. In terms of, like, more of a general, story-wise, I think that the first chapter was great. It really helped show off just how good the voice acting in the game is. There's some genuinely really good voice acting, some of the cutscene choreography, especially in the section near the end when you first encounter Van Damme and you first fight Mobius DJ. It's so good. It really set off like it was a really strong start.
Yeah, I agree. I think talking about the first scene is also a big one for me. and gave me a very different sensation from the previous games was that first flashback where we saw the battle of the Uni, Lance, Noah against Garvel's team. And I think it was a nice way to present those characters, to show us a little bit about the world and how brutal it is to see those kids, like, they just born and they are already fighting since they were born and stuff like that, the whole premise of the game. So I think it was a nice way to introduce themselves and also their personalities. Something that I like about the cutscenes in these games is like the characters that have their function. Like for example, Lance is a defender, Uni is a healer. In the cutscenes, they are always doing stuff of their class. Uni is always healing, Lance is always defending. So it felt really nice to see the stuff from the gameplay reflected in those cutscenes. That was a nice touch. Yeah, and I think related to the first impressions, something that got me right in the beginning was how beautiful the game looks on the Switch. Mostly compared to Xenoblade 2 and the Definitive Edition. The image is way sharper. It's not perfect, but I think it's a really great step forward. Like, this is probably the best that they can do on Switch, I would imagine. Overall, the game looks really good, even though it is massive, it is really big. In general, I just think that it's something, the visuals didn't bother me in this one, because on 2 there were definitely moments where I was like, oh god, this is too much blurry. But in this one, overall, I think it was great. Even on handheld mode, I think on handheld mode, yes, you can notice that it is blurrier, but it definitely didn't, it was still playable, I should say.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Also,
yeah. I think the other thing that was funny for Chapter 1 is just the way that it ended was very unexpected to me. I think this is kind of just how Xenoblade 3 is, because the way it structures its chapters is very different from the previous games. And so Chapter 1 not ending with everyone kind of... It doesn't end once everyone meets up for the first time. Like, they all go back their separate ways, and then they all come back again, and only then the chapter ends. And I did not exactly expect that. I thought it was definitely going to end when Vandom dies.
Yeah. I was under the same impression. Similar to 2, or even some moments on 1, I think. But usually the chapter would end on a high note, or in a very emotional scene, or something like that. But we don't have that here. It is a very different structure, but not only in the way that the chapters end, but the chapters themselves, they are really, the pacing is really different. Like, there are chapters that are super long and have a lot of climaxes, and there are other chapters that are not that much of stuff happening all at the same time. I think I don't have a major issue with that. I think it's just a different way to structure it. But I was a little bit caught off guard with how little the amount of chapters that they were, because I was expecting maybe more than 2, less than the first one, but I wasn't expecting just 7.
I think every Xenoblade game has had less and less chapters.
Yeah.
So I think the first had like 17, X had 12, 2 had 10, and now this has 7.
Exactly. And I think it kind of, I don't know if we had a conversation talking about that, but I think it kind of, the whole structure of the story in these games looks really similar to a movie, I would say, because it feels like it is a single story that you are seeing from the beginning to the end. So all the story beats and stuff like that, because on 2 it was really like every chapter was like an episode from an anime or a series. It was structured in a way similar to that, with you feel that they had the obligation to have something interesting happening at the end of every chapter and stuff like that. And I feel like that here the story is always progressing. That's also...
Yeah, it's a bit more continuous.
Yeah, this is also something interesting. I think it's something positive in the structure of this game. On Xenoblade 2, we had some filler moments. I even talked about how I didn't like a lot about that, like these side stories with Rex helping NPCs and stuff like that. And the whole chapter 4, to be honest. And I have the feeling that on this game, this never happened. Almost, I mean, okay, we have the obligatory hero quest. I mean, that could probably be considered that. But even those, I think they were really interesting to do. I didn't got the impression that I was doing. Maybe it's because the world in this game is so tight and so well connected, but every single hero story, side quest, everything felt at least somewhat interesting. At least in some way or another connected to what we are doing at that moment. We are always helping the world, we are helping the colonies. So
Yeah.
it felt more connected. I don't know if you had the same impression.
I mean, yeah, I think that makes sense because this game is just, it has a very strong theme to it. And the fact that you have this whole structure with the flame clocks and everything going on with that, every single character is basically tied to that. So it kind of makes it so that every single hero you encounter ends up having some kind of relevance, right? Like through the flame clock, the terms, through the fact that they all have like a console watching over them. So everything
Yeah.
ends up feeling, yeah, I mean, like you said, everything ends up feeling very connected. Nothing feels like, you know, you're going completely off the beaten path to do something completely random.
Yes, exactly. I remember I was a little bit worried after chapter 4 when we discovered that we are going to help the colonies and destroy the flame clocks, and I was wondering if every single hero mission would be like basically the same structure, meets the hero, meets the console, kill the console, and liberate the flame clock. But they did a good job, make some variety. Like there were some really different colonies, like Colony Tau, for example. So it was interesting, like knowing different cultures and how the heroes and the other NPCs reacted to that, how their relationship with the consoles was different. So overall, I think they did a really good job with making every single hero side quest feel a little bit different. I would say that not every single hero quest is great. Some of them are a bit less interesting. Some really cheesy dialogue. Usually the console. But some of them are really great also. I think some of the good ones, and even the ones that aren't really that great, some of them redeem themselves with the Ascension quest, so there's also that. But yeah, I like the variety, like Colony Zero, Colony Tau, the Colony Gamma with the Teach I also liked.
Yep. I I think special mention to Colony 15, I think it was, with Triton.
Oh yeah,
Random
that
pirate
was
Mobius.
unexpected. Yes. Yeah. I think overall you can see that they try to give a lot of variety and to create those different. And also I liked how the hero quests were an incentive to explore the areas, because the majority of them were off the beaten path. So you had the choice to either continue the story or to go explore the map and find those hero quests. And because they are usually marked on the map with the little interrogation points, it's not that hard to find them. So it was actually quite fun to, like, oh, today I'm not going to do progress in the story, so I'm just going to do some side quests, and then you meet some new characters and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I really like the whole concept, and I think it's a great improvement compared to the Blade quests on the Xenoblade 2. Even though the Blade quests, like, they were a great idea. I like the idea of having these quests with more cutscenes, with voice acting, but here is definitely an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, just the concept of heroes works really well. The fact that you can't control the seventh member is, it's not that big of a deal because you have 6 characters you can control.
Exactly.
So having the 7th ends up not mattering as much, and then there's like little things that still kind of make them feel like part of the team. The fact that their classes transfer over to main characters, so it's not like you never get to play. You still sort of get to play as them because you basically have all the same arts on the classes.
Yes.
And then you had the fact that in chain attacks you have these individual orders, and I forget what the specific name of it is, but like the hero tactics where they give you bonuses when you use their arts that make them all feel unique and still kind of special. Like they all have a role. It matters which one you choose because it will have an impact on how you structure your chain attacks.
Yeah, no, they were really interesting, and I saw myself shuffling a lot during the game, using different heroes and testing with their classes. And the whole thing with changing classes, getting the classes from heroes or from the other main characters, is just a really great concept, and it's just easy and fun to keep testing different combinations. I don't know what was your overall approach, but I think most people usually use that different got a class to level 10 and then change to other different class and go on. I think it was really fun. Although with some characters like usually Noah, I would like to stick to his main class just because I usually played with him. But it was also really nice to experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I love class systems in RPGs in general, and I feel like this one was done very well. It was just very fun because every class really does feel unique. They all have specific quirks between some attackers that focus on removing aggro or focus on high accuracy. You have healers that focus on buffs or focus on mass healing. You have defenders that focus on like kind of attacking, one that has like an awakening thing. Like, they all have really specific characteristics that make it fun to experiment.
Yeah. And the whole bonus for the chain attack with the heroes also. So, in general, I also, even though I'm not usually when games have a lot of classes, I feel a little bit overwhelmed, but it definitely didn't help here. Maybe because I'm a little used to Xenoblade, but I feel that in general it was a pretty simple system. But talking about the combat in general, I think I'm still trying to get my overall impressions about the combat, because I think that up to a point I was having a lot of fun with it, but close to the end, I don't know, I saw myself not finishing the chain attacks or trying to avoid combats in some moments. So I don't know if I was totally sold on it. It's definitely best than the one on the Xenoblade 1, but I'm still divided if it managed to get it better than the one with Xenoblade 2. But I think overall it's just a way more accessible system. It has some of the elements from 1, it has some of the elements on 2, but it's also a little more straightforward. For example, the chain attacks. You don't need to build orbs or stuff like that. You can use the chain attacks wherever you want. You don't need to use the bar to revive your allies. As long as you have a healer, you can revive your allies. So I think in general, it just felt like a clever way to make the combats in the Xenoblade series.
Right.
I think I definitely had a lot of fun with it. I like it. I like how the positionals are very important again. I think I played most of the time I play as an attacker. I also try with defenders, but as far as I remember, it was fun either way. But yeah, I think it was a great system, definitely, but close to the end I was a little bit like the chain attacks with always the same animations, we always that big animations for the Ouroboros. I think I forgot to mention the Ouroboros. I think that was probably my favorite thing for the combats. I was always looking forward to get to level 3 and to interlink and use the Ouroboros doing tons of damage. But yeah, what was your overall perception of the combats?
Right. I mean, for me personally, I really enjoyed it. I think it is probably my favorite system of all the games. I didn't really have what you experienced, where at the end it started getting a little bit just a little bit less interesting, but I had lots of fun. I always tried to use a whole bunch of different characters, whether that's, switching in the middle of battle, or if it's just, I'm going to control Noah, and I'm going to control Tyon, etc. I really just love the how they kind of split up the roles. This was something that you already kind of saw in Xenoblade 2, where they tried to have this kind of attacker, defender, healer setup, but it didn't really work in part because it didn't really mean much. Some of the best defender blades were attackers. You had some defenders that were really really good attackers but weren't such good defenders. You had healers that were good attackers, some attackers that were great healers. So the division didn't necessarily make as much sense. It was very much on a blade by blade basis. But here, the way that it's split up, where everyone has a specific role, right? And that role is very much emphasized. Like you said, attackers heavily focus on positional arts, so they move around a bunch. Defenders draw aggro, and they have all the defenders have that ring around them that gives them some kind of effect if someone stays in their range, so there's another incentive for positioning. All the healers end up being far more important than they were in any other game, because you have no real healing alternative. You don't really have, like, hey, put this accessory on and now every critical hit gives you health or whatnot.
Yeah.
You need a healer. A healer is the only way that you can revive your party unless you have a specific accessory. Healers are very important, which I think is also something that they did really well with this system, because that very much was not the case in other games.
Yeah, I think the healers were like promoted in this game because you don't have any other way to, and I think this is really the crux of the combats, because if you don't have good healers, you'll probably die very easily. And I saw a lot of people using the hero as a healer to get 3 healers in your team. And I saw that tactic a lot of people using, and you have some great healers. I think Valdi is a great healer. Izzard, I also used Izzard a lot. And yeah, I think that the positionals, they really make the game a little more dynamic, and I liked that. I felt maybe one of the issues that I had using Noah's class is that the cooldown for his arts are a little bit, like, I think even on the maximum rank, a lot of the arts take like 22 seconds to recharge. So in some moments I was like just waiting for them to recharge, and I always waited for the fusion arts because I was trying to get to level 3 on the Ouroboros. But I think the real fun is, like you said, trying to experiment, using different characters, using different classes, because they truly are very different from each other. Maybe, I think my favorite one was probably Ethel's class, to use her, because the arts recharge really quickly, and her talent art also recharge really quickly. So it was, I think the only issue is that she attacks so much that the aggro would usually go to me, so I had to fix that. But I think it was the Xenoblade game that since the beginning I was really strategizing. So how many defenders I'll have on my team, how the arts of these defenders, I saw myself shuffling a lot of stuff, the accessories. So yeah, the strategy part was definitely the best one for me. I think it's really a fun system to toy with, to have different use different characters, using different classes. I think it's good to experiment.
Yeah, the master skills and master arts add a lot to it, just because you can have so much more variety. Like you just mentioned, Ethel's class, I think it's Flash Fencer, has a master skill that lets you start with your talent art at max, which lets you activate right away. And in some cases that's really powerful, like for instance having Noah's Unlimited Sword available at the very start of a fight, which can be kind of nuts.
So, just to mention that, by the end of the game, I was trying to get Melia and Nia to rank 10 to do their Ascension quest. So I used that on Noah with the Ethel class and the Unlimited Sword. So I would kill enemies 10 levels above me with one hit, because he has that thing with the random hits that can instantly kill the enemy. So I definitely abused that.
Yep, really fun. I think it's kind of funny because I love chain attacks in this game. I love the amount of control you have over them. At the same time, I really tried to avoid using them once I was near the end of the game, because on the one hand, I really don't like how it interrupts the music. That's really something that I wish they didn't have, or at least you had an option to disable, because as good
at
as
least
the
for the story moments, right? I think only on the final boss.
Yeah, there's a few.
It's the only moment that the chain attack music doesn't come.
Yeah, but I wish you at least had the option. But anyway, so that's one thing, and then the other thing is just chain attacks are insane. You do so much damage with chain attacks if you know how to optimize them. Like, it's so easy, even on the game's super bosses, to take them from like 70-80% to 0 in one chain attack, which feels unfair. It doesn't feel like you should be allowed to do that.
Though I must say, a lot of the enemies, I think mostly story boss, when I was like at the same level of the boss, There were some sponge HPs, definitely some bosses with a lot of health that I would have to use like 2 chain attacks to actually get them to the point. But I think when you reach like chapter 5, chapter 6, your chain attacks are super powerful. You really can do a lot of damage, like 2 millions, 3 millions, 4 millions. And as I said before, on the chain attacks in this game, you don't have any requirements like the orbs on Xenoblade 2. So as soon as they are charged, you can immediately do tons of damage. And I saw a lot of people disabling overkill, which I can understand why, but I would never do that. Because I found really satisfying to see the numbers going up and up and up.
Yeah, and you can also just interrupt the chain attack if you don't want to necessarily overkill. Like if you just, you barely killed them and you don't necessarily want to go another like 2 rounds of attacking them even though they're dead, you can just end the chain attack right there, which is also a great improvement from I guess mostly 2, because I think 1 also ended when the enemy died.
Yeah, 1 did not have overkill. Yeah, I think you can press plus to end the chain attack, which is great. You can also hold minus to give up on the battle, which is awesome also. Another trick, you can press minus when you want to hear a boss music. It's a good way because then everyone stops shouting.
There's a lot of sound effects and a lot of talking.
But I think just bringing back the issue that I already commented, a lot of the times I did not do the chain attacks because of how long the animation for the Ouroboros attack is. And I think we have in total 6 animation. 2 for each Ouroboros. And I don't know, I had a feeling that with Xenoblade 2, the animations were shorter, but not only that, it was pretty easy to get different animations because you had a lot of blades at the same time with you. So I never felt that with Xenoblade 2, but here I definitely felt it, even though I'm not talking bad about the animations were totally awesome. But yeah, after a while they definitely got old. And usually I would use the same chain attacks order. I would like to use Noah and Mio, so I would always see the same animation.
I think that didn't necessarily bother me as much because since I always had different team structures because I was constantly changing my setups, I did end up having different experiences because just having people reclassed into different roles means you have to use different orders when picking who to attack and when. And I also just really love that little mini game of trying to get your TP as high as possible.
Oh yeah, I love that. I think it's super engaging.
It's super fun. It's like what I loved of gem crafting in Xenoblade 1, which I don't know how common of an opinion that is, but I love this little thing of how can I get this number as big as possible. And it's really fun. There's a lot of different strategies you can use for that. The heroes add a lot to it. I think Sagiri is one of the best if you just want big numbers. I've gotten to, I want to say 623. Wow. Is my highest. It's just fun. I really love the system, and it means that even on repeat chain attacks, if I've done them a lot, just depending on how I start the order, based on like which Ouroboros order I want or what effect I want to get, it still changes up enough of this little like mental game of how am I going to get as high as possible for me that I still end up enjoying it.
It's
definitely long.
There's always a strategy involved, right? Even though you start the chain attack, there's still a mini game that you have to do. No, I agree with you. I love the TP thing. One character that I really like now, of course, in the post game, but Melia, after using her, you can still, like, even if you are above 100%, you can still use one more. So I've been using her a lot, and
Melia is nuts.
They are kind of broken, Nia and Melia, of course, for obvious reasons. But yeah, I think it was a great battle system. It was an improvement in a lot of areas, and I like how they are always trying something different with each new game. So you have this specific feeling, I don't want anyone to understand that I'm complaining because the orbs and the blade systems are not back. I'm actually happy that they try something completely different because I don't want the same thing again. So in general, I think it was really clever. I had some problems, some issues with it, but nothing absolutely crazy. And I think it's one of the best combats in the series.
Yeah. One last thing I want to mention about chain attacks before I move on, because it's a neat detail that I don't know how many people have noticed. Each character starts with a specific amount of TP. Like Lands and Sun start at 15 times, always starts at 35 unless you have any special skills or whatnot. But what's fun is that number reflects like how tactical the character is. So like Tyon is always going to start at 35 and he's one of the highest.
Wow, I
think Izzard is the highest of... Yeah, Izzard is the highest of all the characters at 40. Triton is the lowest of all of them at 10. And it's like all reflective of, you know, how, maybe not necessarily how smart they are, but how good they are at tactics.
Right,
I think it's just a really cute little thing, yeah.
Oh no, that's pretty interesting. I didn't connect to that. I thought that it was something kind of random. But yeah, Lance would usually have these lower numbers that Tyon would have the max. That's a nice touch. Now you mentioned the chain attack interrupting the music of the actual battle, which was something that in particular there's a moment in the beginning of chapter 6 when you're battling Noah. Oh, not Noah. I mean, it is Noah, but I mean
Other Noah.
the other Noah. And a beautiful music plays, very slow, and then you start the chain attack and the mood is instantly ruined.
Yeah, I think it was actually that specific fight where I stopped using chain attacks in the story, just because of that.
I think that was the because here's the thing: the chain attack music is amazing. It's really really good. So I didn't have any issue up to this point, but then at this moment I was like, oh, I see why some people are complaining about that. It's funny because I saw some streamers playing, and every time that this battle come up, they are like, please don't use chain attack, don't use chain attack. The whole chat is always asking to not use. Yeah, but it is weird because the game gives a lot of options. So, and you know, maybe we'll still receive some updates. Xenoblade 2 received a lot of updates in the post-game. So I think one of the things that I imagine would be obvious here is to give the option to have the chain attack music interrupt the actual battle music. And just a button to skip the animations on the chain attack, which would be pretty easy. The game has a lot of that in those other field skills moments or stuff like that. You always have the option to press X and skip the scene, so I think those would be some quality of life changes. But not only that, in an update, I think it would be nice to make the food actually work. I don't know. Did you knew about that during playing the game?
Yeah, I learned about it this week, I think.
Man, I was like, I had the placebo. I thought it was working. Like, I always used the one that would boost CP, and I thought it was actually boosting.
And Manana is the real.
It's the real enemy. Yeah, that was a little bit weird. But yeah, just a heads up, if you are playing the game right now, don't use the food. It doesn't do anything. Only if you are a big Manana fan and you want to see the animation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, if I recall correctly, that the item collection foods do work, but none of the experience or class point foods do.
Right.
Or the gold ones.
That's weird. How did they let that pass?
I don't know.
Yeah, but they'll probably address that. I think the game still did not have a major update. Maybe they will update that when the first DLC wave comes, or it'll probably come before that.
Yeah, there's a few minor things, like I think for some Collectopedia cards are a little bit bugged, where there's two of them that aren't marked as complete even after you've gotten them. And there's also one Collectopedia card that's impossible to do because there's an item coded into the game that wasn't properly assigned to an enemy's drop table. Oh. So you can't actually get it. Yeah, but we'll see.
That's an issue. I mean, I did not have major problems. I think overall it was way better polished than Xenoblade 2 when it came out. The only that I can remember, and it was something that other people had, and I didn't know it was a bug, but before you enter in the final boss, you battle X and Y, and there's no cutscene after you defeat them, but you kind of see them dying in game.
Yeah.
In my playthrough, X didn't die. She just
Oh, that's interesting.
She just stood there, like
Yeah.
the motes were going up, but she never disappeared.
That happened to me with Y. Like, X properly disappeared, and then once I beat Y, I just kind of stood there because I expected it to disappear like X did.
Yeah.
But no.
No,
I didn't know it could happen with X.
well, it happened to me with X, and I thought, okay, that's normal. She'll be there. And then it happened with Y. He disappeared, and I was, oh, that's weird.
Uh-oh.
It was already weird that did not had any cutscene after that, so I was like,
Yeah.
I was wondering if something had gone wrong.
Yeah, we can talk a bit about that as well, but I do feel like probably just the last chapter of the game in general was a bit rushed.
I'm positively sure it was. Yeah, we can talk about that in a moment. But just before, I think we should discuss a little bit about the exploration and the areas in general, because, and here's the thing. I loved the actual exploration, like the gameplay aspect of exploration in this game. I think I liked how the map is all connected and you can go to different areas. Even fast traveling is super fast, and you had caves, you have the hero quests, and not only hero quests, but a lot of other quests to search. And you could find those places from Xenoblade 1, from Xenoblade 2. So in general, I think it was really rewarding to explore this game. I think the actual level design is what I'm trying to say is really good. You have a lot of verticality in areas like the Maxta Whitewood, the swords in the city that you go up. And I think when talking about exploration, the best thing in this game to me is Aerithia Sea. I think it's something that we never quite had in a Xenoblade game, which is a big area that you can explore with a vehicle. And it was just loads of fun to me. It was like a small Wind Waker in my Xenoblade game, you know? I really liked it. I really like to find all the different islands, and there's a lot of stuff in the Cadencia region in general, so
It's huge.
it's huge. I mean, for people who want to complete the map, I don't know if it's even possible.
Well, thankfully, if you find all the...
the landmarks.
I believe it's rest spots, landmarks, secret areas, and locations. The locations is the important one because it doesn't actually mark on the map the location, which is a little bit annoying,
difficult, yeah.
But it does actually autofill the map, which, thank God. It was already bad enough, like manually filling Air of Sea in Xenoblade 1 when you didn't know that map autofilled.
And
so
Air of Sea don't have
cannot
anything
imagine.
in the lower area. It's like just water.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to conclude what I was saying, so from a level design perspective, I loved it. But from a art design perspective, I think it was probably the least inspired Xenoblade game. I'm not 100% sure of that. But I think there weren't a lot of moments that I was, wow, this is so different, this is so creative. Moments like I had in the left area when I saw the Cloud Sea for the first time and stuff like that. I don't think I had any moments quite like that in Xenoblade 3. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, I actually do. I think I have a few complaints about the areas in Xenoblade 3, nothing major, but I do think that's one of them, in that the areas, for the most part, they didn't really feel super unique or different. There's a handful of ones that I liked quite a bit, like the when you first get into Cadencia, is that sort of like swampy part that I think is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I really love Sword March, where you're climbing up the Makana's sword that's also all snowy. I absolutely love that, and I'm really sad that it's not any bigger, because that's definitely my favorite area. But yeah, I think in general, it's not super different from anything we've seen in 1 and 2, which I guess is sort of part of the intent, because it's a mix, but it does kind of leave you with a sense of the areas not really standing out quite as much. Like, Aerithia is kind of just, this is the water one, and Fornus, for the most part, is like, this is the desert one.
Yeah, and I mean, right at the beginning, I think the areas are really whatever. Like, you start the game and you have this first area, which is basically a temperantia, just with completely destroyed by the war. And then you start to get to the grassy area, but there's not... I don't think Milik Meadows come close to Gormoti or Gar Plains. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it doesn't feel that huge, you know? It's a really hard to exactly point out what is going on. And then...
It might also be just kind of... You know, this is the third time we've had the big grassy plain area at the start of a game.
With the big monkey.
Sorry, the fourth time.
Yeah.
Yeah, fourth time with X.
Yeah, it's true. I think it doesn't. There were not a lot of areas that actually felt new. I think there were some, like, I can't remember the name of that area close to Colony Iota. With the blue trees.
Oh, Elise Highway?
Yeah, exactly. I think that the area actually looked quite different.
Yes.
But it was almost not used in the story. But it was a nice area because you can climb to that point.
Yes, distant fingertip.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That was great. That was a nice climb. But yeah, overall it didn't felt as creative as 1 and 2. But it had some great moments. I think another great thing is to see in this game, if you hit some high points, you can see how the areas are connected, and that's really nice. I think one nice shot that I had was when I was in the snowy area. I forgot the name. It's Capricorn Peak, is it?
Yeah, Capricorn Peak.
And I looked down there and I saw Colony 9, the Feronis.
Yes.
That was a really nice look. Yeah, it's cool.
It's a shame that it was at the very end, but man, it was really fun kind of looking down on that.
And just while we're still talking about the areas, I think Capricorn Peak is like the most boring snowy area in a Xenoblade game. Like, it's literally really just snow.
Anything. Yeah, it doesn't have anything special. It doesn't have any like huge ice crystals. It doesn't have like the ancient ruins that Tantal had.
Yeah.
It just, there's nothing really that sets it apart, which is kind of the problem with a lot of the areas in general, like we've been saying.
Yeah, true. They felt a little less inspired in general. I was expecting something nice from it. Now, of course, at least we had the castle with Nia. I forgot the name.
Cloudkeep?
Yeah, the Cloudkeep, exactly. That area was amazing. I love that concept.
It was great. I think this kind of plays into why I feel about part of the end of being rushed, is that I really like Cloudkeep, but it also kind of just feels like a dungeon where they forgot to put the enemies.
I was going to say that. It could be a dungeon, right?
Yeah, it just feels like a really small dungeon and they forgot to put any enemies or obstacles.
How many dungeons we have at the game? We have the final one. I think Cavis Castle could be one.
Yeah, technically you could say the prison camp, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe the Orion Tunnels? That could count as one, I guess.
Yeah, true. The Orion Tunnels also. The prison was a bit like... When they said, "Oh, you're going to be 3 days here," I thought, okay, they're not going to make me play 3 days here just doing some quests, right? And they actually did.
Yep.
It was nothing huge, and we still had some nice cutscenes here and there. But yeah,
I mean, for the payoff afterwards, though.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was kind of the whole prison arc, right? It was like a moment in the game where they really. Did not let you explore the world. They kind of let you know about that, like, hey, you'll not be able to go back for a while. But yeah, the payoff was amazing, so I don't have any major issues.
It's kind of funny. We had the prison section and then the prison section.
Yeah. It was like, oh no, again in the prison section. Yeah, no. I think it's weird because let's talk about the overall pacing for a moment. When I started the game and I was playing like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, I was like, okay, the pacing is really good. I think like the story is always progressing, there's always stuff happening. And then you reach chapter 5 and the beginning of chapter 6 and oh my god, it's the ultimate climax. It almost feels as the game could end.
Yeah.
And then after that, things start to get really weird. The game starts to rely a lot on side stories for Mio and for Noah. and some weird developments for some characters. You have the final moments of D&D, and then you go to chapter 7, and while I'm playing, I'm kind of waiting for something bigger to happen, and kind of nothing happens. And I get the impression that I already saw the actual climax of this game, that there's nothing crazy to happen, which, granted, here's the thing, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is absolutely amazing. It's a fantastic game, but it's inevitable to have expectations after 1 and 2. The final moments of 1 and 2, they are like a crazy roller coaster. I think Xenoblade 2 is a game that in particular starts slow but ends really crazy, and Xenoblade 1, it has a great pacing overall. You have some big moments in the middle, in the start, but by the end it gets completely insane. So I think I was kind of expecting to see that in the end of this one. I think that's overall why it feels like... It's funny, I don't know if it's the story. I get the impression that it's a little bit of the direction. The way that the scenes were handled in chapter 6 and 7, they are a little bit weird. It's like the dialogue is not at that level, The overall story, the dialogue still is good, but like the way that the scenes are handled, I don't know, I get the impression that a lot of the scenes feel a little more weird in comparison to the previous one.
Yeah, it's odd. Like, the story has a pretty fast pace up until, you have the big Melia robot reveal in chapter 4, and then you have like the big reveal at the city, and then obviously you have like the gigantic climax at 5 and 6, and then it just kind of goes down from there. The pace never really picks back up. And I think, like we've mentioned, I think part of 6 and 7 definitely felt rushed, where I think they've definitely wanted to do more with the game at that point, but they just kind of had to wrap things up and kind of tie the remaining plot points around what they had left, which made some of the things feel odd. Like, the whole first conversation that the party has with Nia kind of just feels really weird. Like you mentioned, where it's like, hi, I'm going to give you this backstory. And it's like, okay, thanks. Can you do anything to help us? And she's like, no. And then you leave. And then you come back right away after. And it's like, hi, can you give us this thing? And it's like, okay, here. It's like, okay, thank you. Now bye. And then you leave again. It's like...
And then you have this quest to find the parts of the origin, right? To get to the boats. And this is just a typical rushed video game. It's like the final 3-4 quest on Wind Waker. Like, just collect this to get to the final boss.
That screams of, we wanted to do a lot more here, but weren't able to, but we still left the same amount of the shards in.
Yes.
Because it would have been fine. Like, that's the thing, is this would have been fine if they had just had 2. They had one at Cloud Keep with Nia, and then they had the other at Keva's Castle. Just those 2, you would have the 2 main story segments, and it would have been fine. Even it would have been thematic, because you would have had one where, like, Nia is, and the other where, Melia, sort of, but not really is. Yeah,
exactly. Like,
instead it's like, hey, go to this random bird nest.
It felt a little bit like side content in the main story, We didn't have that during the first chapters, but it felt like at the moment a little bit of it was actually getting to the place. And here's the thing. We were expecting this game to not be rushed, right? And this is a different kind of rushed, because it doesn't feel like, oh my god, we have to finish the game immediately because the time to release it is coming out. It feels like we planned this game, we have this amount of time for the script. After that, we are going to start developing the game. And maybe a little part of the script or the scenario, I'm not 100% sure how this works. But like in a specific part of the development, it was rushed, It felt like something was missing around there. And then they had to, because the actual game is actually polished. There's no major issues like we had on Xenoblade 2 with bugs and stuff like that, the menus being something. So it felt like they actually delivered what they set out to deliver. But like I think the time that they gave to themselves was not enough, or maybe something along those lines.
either like they realized that they ran out of the budget, that they didn't have the budget to be able to do everything they needed to do, or they realized they wouldn't have at some point earlier on they realized they wouldn't have the time to be able to do everything they wanted to, so they had to cut back a bit. But I mean, like you said, it definitely feels odd, and that kind of extends. I wouldn't say it extends to the very end, because I feel like the final battle with Zed feels fine in that, like, it feels like that was what Takahashi wanted. Like, it doesn't feel like that was kind of, cut off or shortened and whatnot. But even up till there, like, what we talked about with X and Y, where they just kind of die and there's not even a cutscene, it's like, really? Like, really? This is what you chose to be the end of these characters, that you're introduced as being, Zed's right and left hand men? Like, that doesn't feel right.
Man, for you that are listening right now, I'm sorry for the moment that sounds a little negative, because I realized that we did not talk about the best moments in the story. But as soon as this ends, we are going to talk about it. But just still in this negative note, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I completely hate Zed. I think it's the worst main villain in a Xenoblade games. Man, I think it's worse than Gort and Gelgar. Sorry, I think it's worse. Like,
okay, I can sort of take Gort, but Gelgar might be pushing it.
Okay, Gelgar, maybe I'm pushing.
Gelgar died in a side quest. Come on.
But like, just like comparatively to how big they should be, like Gelgar was the villain of Future Connected, a small epilogue. But Zed, he's the ruler of this world. And the guy, I understand, like, I saw a lot of people, oh, but you have to see he's not an individual, he's a concept and stuff. I completely understand that. But it's not because it makes sense in the world of the game that he becomes a good villain.
I get that.
He's not, like, it's not satisfying to defeat him. You didn't even defeat him, like, you didn't have that classic moments in the Xenoblade games where the main character slash the final boss. He just, like, you're talking to him and then he becomes a big head, which I understand, but I found kind of ridiculous, to be honest, to be fighting that gigantic head. The actual scenario the actual scenario was great, but I never respect. I think, because here's the thing, I had some hopes for Zed. When we saw the memories with Anne, and I saw that Zed gave him the two choices, and how Zed made him choose between Mia and the city, and I thought, oh my god, this guy is completely mad, he's a psychopath, stuff like that. So I was expecting to have some background on him, or something to make him feel a little bit human. But when we actually fight him, I feel that all his dialogue is so, I don't know, it just didn't get to me, It never felt like he was actually saying something that his goal was actually convincing to me, compared to Malos, compared to Zanza. Because I saw people always also saying like, oh, but Xenoblade is always like that. You had the compelling human villain, which would be Anne, and you have the villain that is just bad because he's bad, which would be like Malos and Zanza. But I think Zed is way worse than Malos and Zanza.
Yeah, I mean, Malos and Zanza, even then, they have some, especially Malos, has still, like, motivation and maybe not a character arc, but they have a clear character and personality and whatnot. Yeah. I think for me, I agree with you. N definitely carried it as far as the villains go, and I really like N. I think N is a great villain, but I agree with you that Zed is a little weak. That does bother me. I don't think it bothers me as much because, like you said, the whole thing about him being more of a concept than a person, and the whole fight with him being less of a, physical fight, but being more of a clash of ideals in a way. So that doesn't bother me quite as much, but I definitely agree that as far as villains go, he's not a Malos, he's not a Malthus, he's not like an Eggle or even a Zanza. He doesn't work great. He works fine as a concept, but he doesn't really land as a character, which is not great because, as part of Xenoblade, we expect characters, like good villain characters, and he didn't really fulfill that.
Exactly. Because I know Takahashi, I was like, okay, this guy will have a sad backstory. And also, here's another thing. I know that it is kind of a cliche in the Xenoblade series already to be, oh, this villain will probably be a nice guy and we just don't know the shitty stuff that he has seen. And I understand that it would be a little, again, that if they did with... Because I think in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I love the villains, but if you made an argument that Takahashi was a little exaggerating on giving backstory to everyone. That's the scene where all the Tordan guys are dying and every single one of them has a flashback.
Like Patroka dies and then you get a flashback of like, oh, this is why she's sympathetic. It's like,
I understand people having problems with that because, it felt like a little exaggerated. And I think with this one, I had this clear... I think Takahashi wanted to do something different because this game is different from 1 and 2. It is a bit less heroic and philosophic and a little more poetic, I should say. So the feelings and what people were feeling and the fears of people were really important to the villain and the concept that he did.
Right.
But I think the actual execution could be a little better, to make me actually feel something.
Yeah, I think another big part of it is that you first see Zed in chapter 2? Or the start of chapter 3?
I think so.
He's set up very, very early on. And he never is, there's never that payoff. You're waiting basically the entire game, knowing who he is roughly, and there's never more to it. It's like, hey, we think he looks like he's the big bad guy of Mobius, and that's literally it. Basically just as much about him at the start of the game as you do at the end.
And even if he didn't need a sad backstory, but even if he was more like Zanza, like an actual guy that is so above everyone else that he just doesn't care for your feelings or something to that level, I think it would be nice because there's this moment with Anne, and then he's having this conversation with Anne during the start of chapter 6. And I think Zed says to Anne that he was beguiled by him, that he was interested in him. So it gave me that impression, and with the whole theater thing, that he really liked the entertainment. Like, he's there to watch those people suffer.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think if the game had gone through that route, that he's a crazy guy who just enjoys to see other people suffering, I think it would be a little better, it give more satisfaction to actually defeating him.
Because there's this huge contrast where you see in several scenes that he acts like a person in some regards. When you confront him, they're like, why are you doing this? Why are you causing all these people to die over and over again? And he says something like, because it amuses me. Which, I'm a big bad guy, whatever. But then also, he's not really a person. He is born out of the fears of these people, and he's more of a concept. But they still sort of try and play him off as, a character. And so you just have this weird clash where it's like, well, is he supposed to be purely a conceptual being? Or is he actually trying to be a character? You can't really have it both ways like that.
Yeah, and you could see that those ideas were there, and I think a little bit of time was needed to develop those a little bit more. That these moments right by the end where they start to see their faces on Zet, and they're like, oh, I see, Zet is like our fears and stuff like that. I think this was a nice idea, but it could be a little more developed, to actually bring, oh, he is also our fears and what we are feeling right now. I don't know, the way that the game actually positioned him since the beginning, playing with those lives and stuff like that, it didn't felt as if he was just fear. At least for me, it felt a little weird. But overall, we had problems with that. I think chapter 7 it's weird because it's the final chapter of the game, but it's probably the weakest. If I try to think about it,
flaws.
I mean, it has the scenes right at the end, which are amazing. We have the big scale final battle, but okay, let's just go back just a little bit and then we return to the ending. But for now, let's talk about chapter 5 and chapter 6. We have these, while playing Xenoblade, we have these expectations that in a specific moment we are going to have our hearts completely destroyed. And I don't think a Xenoblade game has managed to reach all the right spots just like this one. I think I said to you, but after chapter 5 and 6, I was completely ready to declare this as the best Xenoblade game. It was really, really good. The direction, the dialogue, the plot twist, everything worked in a way that never worked quite like this in the series, because it was not as relied in the action scenes. It was more of raw feelings, raw emotions, and all those characters coming together in a fantastic way. Mostly I would say Noah and Mio, of course, but the whole group dynamic is so fantastic. I was crying, like ugly crying, with Mio talking to Noah in the prison scene. I think it was so well written, so well directed.
Like I've heard people refer to Xenoblade 2 as being, compared to Xenoblade 1, is a game with higher highs but lower lows.
Yes.
I think that is a perfect description for 3 in some regards, because like we just talked about, the ending, at least the villain has a lot to be desired compared to past games, and that's definitely a low. But my god, the high is like reaching the stratosphere.
I think it's my perfect.
It's insane.
It's my favorite sequence from any Xeno game, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
For sure.
It's hard to talk about because I mean, where do you even start? Everything was just perfect. It was done so well.
Just to not lose what you just said about this game being high and lows, I think it's different from Xenoblade 2. Xenoblade 2 is high and lows, but I think this one is high and mids. I would say chapter 6 and 7 were not completely bad, but they were really mid, you know? Like they were that midpoint where you were expecting more because those are the final chapters. I think it's that feeling that the game has. But just coming back to what we are talking, I think what really gets me is that the whole game they are saying that Mio is going to die. And you are like, okay, Mio is the main character. They're not going to kill her.
They keep saying like, oh, you have 3 months. Oh, you still have
every single time.
Oh, you still have 1 month. And up to that prison scene, it's still like, oh, you have 1 month. We have time. And suddenly, just bam, like no, you are stuck 1 month in prison, and everything changes.
Man, it's such a destruction. You can do anything, and they show the struggle.
It's genius.
Yeah. They show the struggle in that montage playing A Step Away, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. And it's a perfect montage showing them trying to break the bars. And we know that this is completely pointless. They know that it is completely pointless. And because of that, it is so heartbreaking to see. Talking about the foreshadowing about Mio, it's so obvious that when Anne comes to Noah in the prison, he just says, homecoming. And when he says homecoming, it's obvious what he's talking about. It's like he doesn't even have to explain, hey, you'll be on this prison for a month waiting for your friend to die. We know exactly what he's going to do because Mio is in the other cell and is immediately destructive. This scene where Anne is talking to Noah in the prison is such a great villain scene. It's so he's so destructive for Noah, and you see his pain, and it's just torture.
There's this great moment in the middle of it where Noah and N have, obviously the same person, but they're designed a little differently. And one of the big changes is that Noah has their eyes are different. Noah's eyes are a lot brighter, they have a bit more depth to them, whereas N's are a lot more faded.
That's a nice touch, yeah.
And there's a great moment in the prison scene where Noah's eyes become like N's, where it's like, he's lost all hope. Like,
wow,
it's a great little visual representation of that.
I will say, I didn't actually notice that, but I felt that. I remember that because you can see during the scene, Noah's looks very different, because so far, I'm not saying that he was a super optimist like Rex, but he was a leader. He always had stuff in his hands, and he was not one to lose his temper. Usually that would be Lance, for example. And here you can see that he is completely lost. And you can see in his eyes, his face looks different also. He looks like he's actually tired. And it is a great moment, and it shows you the struggle. And it's crazy that they are the same person, right? The whole dynamic just makes it even more complex as it is to talk about these feelings.
it's a very Shulk Zanza kind of moment
Yeah,
where, you know,
yeah.
the same actor, but he's playing them very differently, and it's done super well.
It's a
Like,
fantastic.
major props to Harry McIntyre. for his
Exactly, I
performance,
wanted
because,
to say
wow.
that just before we were recording a couple of minutes, YouTube recommended me a comparison of the English dub and the Japanese dub. And it was not that scene, it was actually in that scene in chapter 6 when Anne discovers that his M is dead.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best voice works for Harry McIntyre. And I saw the comparison. The Japanese one is really, really good. It does, because the way that Japanese voice work works, it does sound a little like Japanese villains in anime in general, just because they usually have a similar voice. But the emotions are like, it's cool to see the original one because Harry McIntyre tried to scream in the same way, but he also added his voice to it, and it's just such a great work of adaptation, of localization, because one of the reasons why Rex's scream looks so weird in the first chapter is because the actor is trying to replicate the same sound in Japanese, because in Japanese he kind of says "ah yeah," but in a way that sounds a little better, you know, but he's actually making that contraption in his voice. So to see with what McIntyre did here, it just sounds completely amazing, and you can hear the despair in his voice. It's so raw, so good.
And can we talk about the actual homecoming specifically, because that is, it's so good. It's something that the entire game, you know, the homecoming has been brought up constantly as like this big event, the celebration. And eventually people start being like, well, you know, it's a symbol of death, of the 10-year term, something that we don't necessarily want. And then we finally get an actual full homecoming scene, and it's done so well. Like, the music playing is simultaneously beautiful. It's a genuinely pretty song, but it's so scary, right? It's so somber because you know what is actually happening here, and you know what is about to happen, and everything that happens in terms of dragging them to the stage, like just pulling Mio out there, Noah seeing her and just not being able to do anything, and then finally, after she passes on, and just throwing Noah the flute and saying, like, you're an Ofsir, aren't you? Like, oh my god.
That was so hurtful.
That hurts so bad.
And the camera is below. We are looking at Anne from the point of view of Noah, and he's like, go on, send her. Like, oh my god.
You're an Ofsir, aren't you? Like, oh my god.
Oh, no. It's so hurtful. Yes.
It hurts so bad.
And in that, still talking about that scene, you talked about the music, and because really every single moment they have the audience in their hands at that moment, because after suffering through the prison scene, you are like, okay, this is the moment for us to turn this game. This is the moment that the guys will this
is when the city comes in and they interrupt the homecoming, and
or something like that. Or even Riku goes to Noah and say, hey Noah, you're going to give up? You just have to call your sword.
Yeah,
and then after that, after that, Annie and frees Noah, and I'm like, oh, that's the moment. Noah is going to take the sword, or something like that. But no, they really destroy you up to the last moment. I think another great moment is when Noah actually takes the flute, and I don't know what Noah was intending, but I think he was intending to play, maybe because to be an officer is not a bad thing. So he was actually the way that he holds the flute gives me the impression that he was going to play.
I think it was probably also part of, you know, this is, I mean, it's kind of the only thing he had of Mio that was left, right?
Exactly.
Like, this was his only possession of her, was his only connection.
Yeah.
So it was probably also a means of, like, trying not to let her go.
Exactly. But when he looks at her, he immediately drops it. And it's just, and it's the same moment that we as audience see that Mio is actually dying, and we know that there's no turning back.
Yeah.
And
like, even if you know that she's a main character, if you saw, I think it was the Paris Expo, you saw an area that you hadn't gone to yet in the game, and you saw Mio. So even then, you know as a player rationally that Mio is not forever gone from your party.
Yes.
But the way they set it up emotionally, the stakes, the characters, the acting, is done so well that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that your rational brain is like, oh, she's not gone for good, because you think, oh god, what these characters are feeling feels real. Like, it doesn't matter that I know, because what they're feeling is, it's real to them.
Exactly, but that's the whole thing, right? That's the whole thing of a fantasy movie, of a fantasy anime, is how well they manage to sell those quote-unquote lies to us, and Xenoblade does that really, really well. I think after this moment, of course Mio dies, and after that we get the impression that Noah also dies. It's literally brutal.
Just ending the chapter there is like such a tease. Like, I was playing.
This is the only time that they do that, right? Such a big ending. Yeah.
Like, the first time, I think, across all of the games, it was nuts. Like, I remember when I gone there, it was like 11 p.m. or so. I was just about to like finish playing, wrapping up for the night, and I was just before the end of the prison sequence. Like, before you escape the prison and eventually you meet MNN. And then you just, I went there, I fought them, everything happened, and then everything kept happening, and then more cutscenes, and then like 3 hours later, I still was not falling asleep yet because I still had more to go through, because there was so much going on, and there's no way I was going to be able to stop when the end of the chapter is Noah seemingly getting his head chopped off.
Oh my god, yeah, it's literally impossible. I was playing during the evening, and I thought that, okay, I'm just going to finish the prison arc.
Yeah.
And then I was surprised to see that when we go to the castle, the chapter doesn't end. So there's still a lot after that. Yes, it's the pacing is really unpredictable in this game. Usually when someone is playing, I'm also saying, hey, if you feel that you are close to the end of chapter 5, reserve a special moment for that. Be sure that you have a lot of time to play.
keep a few hours aside, because
yes, exactly.
It's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride, exactly. And it doesn't stop there. So
nope.
We finished chapter 5, and then we have the moments that you get to play as Noah during the memories, which was a bit confusing for me when I saw it immediately. I thought, is Noah's dead? Is he actually dead? Because it gives the impression that he's looking at his body.
I mean, every main character in Xenoblade up to that point has sort of died in some way, so
yeah, true,
it fits the MO.
For sure. But then we got to see the actual plot twist that Noah and Mio has lived a lot of times already, and every single time, apparently, Noah has to see Ems dying. I think it's a little bit confusing when they show at the beginning, because you see the first memory, and he is kinda in the lost numbers, Noah and Mio.
Right.
And they manage to activate the Ouroboros stone, and then you see Mio dying. But then he wakes up as if he was dreaming. So I'm not sure if that's another memory after that.
Right. I think that the idea is, I mean, obviously we know that N is one of Noah's past lives that eventually ended up accepting Zed's deal. And I think the idea is that in some way, everything that happens on Ionios to people is kind of a cycle where even if the specifics aren't the same, you have the same general things that happen, right? It's the same thing that we see later on with Joran, where Zed says that, like, in every life, Joran ends up dying young and, like, miserably. And I think it's a similar thing here, where that first time that you see N lose M, and then die himself, and then he wakes up, that was supposed to be a previous life, and he's just, he's sort of remembering the previous lives. And it's like that weird sudden jolt of like, oh, there's a dream. Because doesn't one of the characters mention that the dreams you have are your past lives or something?
I don't remember if anyone mentions that explicitly.
I think that might have been part of Ashera's Ascension quest.
Oh, maybe.
Because she also has a thing with her past lives that's pretty important, but...
Ooh. That's interesting.
It's a good quest.
I have to do that.
Trust me.
I'll do that.
It turns her from just a fun character to a really deep one.
Whoa.
But anyway, going back to that whole weird flashback sequence, because that was really like, the 1-2 gut punch of going from seeing, you know, everyone stuck in the prison and then Mio dying to like seeing Noah lose Mio over and over and over again, them having a child and then her still dying and him then dying and having to leave the child alone. Like it you know, the Mio dying was like the first big hit that cracks you, and then that's like the additional blow that just breaks you apart.
I was expecting to stop crying, but yeah.
Yeah.
It was even worse. No, yeah, that whole sequence, man. And we see that happen. Just something that I wanted to point out about what you mentioned. It makes sense that every time that they born, similar stuff happened to them, because they are the same people. They born with those people. They are born from the memories of the origin, right? We know that by the end of the game. So basically, they are always the same people being reborn and with the same personality, I would say. So it makes sense that Noah is always falling in love with Mio. That probably not in all his lives he met Mio, but I think we see the ones that they actually met and they actually got together, and we see how different stuff has happened in the past. And but yeah, the whole sequence, such well made, I think. And the thing is, the thing that works so well, I think, is that we have to watch all those scenes, and we see Noah turning into Anne, and we kind of get it why. I think it's just like you see how much suffering he actually had to endure. I think it's even more justifiable than Jean to me, because Jean was one character, a really similar character, and that you see how much he suffered, and it was like, okay, I kind of understand why he's like that. But I think Anne is on another level. Like,
it's funny, after that whole sequence, one of my first thoughts was, wow, Jin, eat your heart out, because like, Anne was just like, it's the same plot point, except, I mean, arguably worse. Jin had the whole thing with Laura where he saw her die and he couldn't bear to lose his memories of her, he became Flesh Eater and all that, whereas Noah ends up seeing Mio die over and over and over again, to the point that he's basically broken down, and the only choice he can make is to give up basically everything just so that she can live and he can be with her.
In both cases, I mean, they were victims of the cruel world, like how the world actually works. I think here it's more pronounced because they really actually want to change how the world works. So when he receives an option to actually change that and be alive and all of that, we kind of see his points. And I think the really payoff that really works with that is that after we see all those memories, after we see the plot twists, Anne learns that M died. And when he learns that M died, I was really sad for him. Because I saw what he has gone through.
It's this huge moment too of just him realizing it's like you said earlier, it's played so well.
Yes.
Because it's generally a mix of like genuine grief and also just him being completely psychotic. Like he
loses immediately.
His mind.
He starts to shake, and we see him screaming and all of that, and and he's saying, so the one who died, and he doesn't even complete the sentence. Yes.
Although I did see a fantastic video where it was basically just and doing like that entire scene with N, but the moment where he's like the one who died and then he starts screaming, they swapped his scream with Rex's scream.
Oh no!
It just killed me.
I did not got to see that one. Yeah, but I can see people doing that in the internet. It sounds pretty on point. But yeah, I think, and talking about the actual plot twist, I did not see that coming. It is like, I saw a streamer playing that she was with... She actually said something like, when they were saying, oh, Mio's gonna die, she actually said something to the lines of, Am did something, we saw her crying, maybe there's something related to that, but I did not make that connection at the moment. I completely forgot about that thing.
Yeah.
Because right after we see her crying, she immediately starts to fight us. So we are like, okay, she's a villain.
Yeah, I had a feeling that like M wasn't on board with what N wanted. I felt like that was pretty clear from her introduction.
I also
like,
had. She never felt as happy, not happy, but as cruel
devoted
as him. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's not surprising that she ended up turning, but still the way in which she did was very much unexpected. And the fact that she, you know, she gave her life for it was also like, wow.
Yes. And like,
Dang.
I liked that because I liked the fact that she was unhappy with him. Because when I was seeing the memories of Anne, I was like, okay, this is the Anne's side of story. What is Mio's thinking? What is her side of the story for that? I was thinking like they were kind of not showing. And when she explained that she was unhappy with him, because of course she was, like the whole thing. And man, the guy immediately becomes super possessive. That's this moment when he says that Mio's mine. He says,
Well,
and again the voice
like,
acting.
You seem
So
happy with
good.
like my woman on your arm.
Yes, I remember that. I mean, it's a great characterization overall. I think Noah is my favorite character, but because of Anne, like I see both of them as kinda the same character. I can see that, so I really like how complex they both are.
Well, we're on the point of plot twists. During that whole like flashback sequence with Noah, I was really wondering what exactly that was, because that gave me such huge like Shulk and Alvis vibes.
Yeah, true.
When Elvis would talk to him, I'm like, is this an Aegis? Is this But I think the way they did it with it being Mio using M's power to basically, you know, give Noah these memories back was a good way of explaining it.
It made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
It actually was something that a plot twist very well planned overall. It's weird because no, I'm just going to say when the person talking to Noah is using the cloak, I think it's actually child Noah, right?
Yes, I think
but
so.
But then it changed to Mio. I think it just was Mio's idea to do that all over.
she was being a little bit dramatic.
I mean, she really got the part, right? Doing the battle. I was like, was that actually her?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's also what surprised me, is the fact that the switch happened at that point, because like that means she spent an entire month, you know, pretending to be M, which that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit. I thought about that a little. Thought that they could give a little bit more foreshadowing with some of Mio's M's action. Rewatching this scene, there's this moment where Senna and Lance are going to sacrifice themselves because. Yeah. And at that moment, I think they could have shown just a little bit of worry in M's face or something like. But I think it would be a little too obvious, right?
Well, actually, I think that would have worked great because they're doing it to try and kill N. So if they had actually showed M being concerned, it could have also been like, oh, like, you know, she's worried about N, not about them. But
yeah, that's true. But she was kind of emotionless on that scene. But still, I think we can just imagine that Mio was really committed to going through with it. Yeah. You're going to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, just because talking about the whole Aegis thing in the flashbacks, just that what leads into what the whole memory sequence and the whole N and M dying thing leads into is Noah getting his Monado not Monado?
Yes.
And what is going on there? Because we still don't really have a great answer to what's up with the I think when it's the Ouroboros one, it's the Sword of Origin.
Yeah, so we talked about how the ending is not that good from a perspective of just overall story direction and stuff happening, but also we don't get a lot of answers with this game. And it's a little bit weird because there's tons of setups. I mean, I understand when the story wants to leave something open to interpretation, that's completely fine, but when the game is constantly giving us information that, like, it's, oh, we are not going to say the name of the swords, we're not going to say the name of the baby, we're not going to tell you what happened with the baby. Oh, look, all these founders, they look kind of familiar, right? Yeah, I don't know about that, like, also.
to be fair, the game does give some answers, but they're very surface level ones that don't really feel like they're giving the whole picture. Like, we know that Lucky 7 was made using Origin with, like, a key that Melia has because she's the one that made it, but, like, okay, but still, why is it basically why is the actual Sword of Origin basically a Monado? In terms of like, the appearance and whatnot? Or, like, we know that Nia made the Ouroboros Stone with her key and with Origin, but at the same time, like, did she make the entire, like, concept of Ouroboros? Because that seems like a bit much.
Yeah. I think
it's like...
some of that points, I think, they are a bit fun to interpret. Like, for example, Riku. What is going on with Riku? I read online someone saying something that, the game makes pretty obvious. It just doesn't say out loud that Riku probably met Melia before everyone else. And Melia probably gave him the Lux 7 to actually end up in the hands of Ouroboros in some moments. I think that's... you can imagine that.
He is one of the legendary Nopon smiths. And I think all of the Nopon smiths have an age marked as, like, question mark.
Oh,
so we don't know how old they are. So it's very possible that Riku was one of the original smiths that just kind of, went into hiding, basically, but kept Lucky 7 on him until he gave it to Noah. Although we also... I don't know, we can also mention that, like, what sense does it make that both N and Noah have Lucky 7?
Oh, true.
Because there's everything going on with... This is one bit that I'm still not entirely sure what's happening, is why it is that Noah and Mio exist when N and M became Mobius. And specifically, why is it that Noah has Lucky 7 when, N kept Lucky 7? Unless Melia just made, like, Lucky 7 2.
It's weird. Like, I mean, it's very possible to exist another Lucky 7, because we know that it is made from that metal from Origin, so that kind of makes sense. And Noah is the wielder of Origin, so in that sense, it kind of makes sense. However, who gave him... I'm thinking right now if Riku gave the Lux 7 to Anne, and then years after that, she gave another Lux 7 to Noah.
I mean, I think in Chapter 2, when they talk about Lucky 7, Riku, it would have been Riku, says that there were 7 weapons made by the legendary Nopon. So maybe they just made 7 Lucky 7s, and that was the second one?
That's not impossible, because all of them have the same hammer, so... That would not be impossible. But I think you mentioned about why Noah and Mio exist. I think they are just, like, similar to Zet, right? They are created by Origin because of the feelings that M and N have left behind. I think it's something to that note.
Maybe.
They are exactly what M and N were trying to be, like, something like that. I think it's more a poetic thing than actual lore behind it.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, in terms of, I guess, mechanics, how that would work. I was thinking maybe, N and M died. They went back into the whole cycle thing, but then, like, while they were already in the process of being reborn, Zed kind of, like, yoinked N out of it, so there were technically 2 versions of him, one that turned into Mobius and one that went back into the cycle, and then did the same thing with M. I mean, ultimately, that doesn't matter much. That's more of a, I am a stickler for details, and I want to know what exactly happened.
Yeah, but I see...
But it's not super important.
But I see from where you're coming, because they have to be born from a pod, just like everyone else and stuff like that, so... That's also another question. In general, I think... One of the reasons why I think the answers in this game are not as satisfying is because the Origin is a plot device very much like to justify every single thing. It can create anything, it can make anything, everything can be born from people's feelings. Yeah, it's a huge MacGuffin, and it can explain almost everything. It is still is. I like the backstory behind it. That the two people from different worlds decided to connect. I really love the whole thing with they could contact via light that Nia explained. I like that idea.
That part really confused me because I didn't understand if they were talking about like magic light or if it's like, hey, we discovered the radio. Like,
yeah, I think it was something like that, to be honest. Yeah,
I was like, oh, like in the moment I'm like, is this a magic light thing that's going to be plot relevant, or is it just, you know, they discovered physics?
I like how they stayed consistent with the technology from the world of Xenoblade 1 and 2, because Nia is talking with Melia with the same device that Benna used on Xenoblade 2 to talk with the console. Yeah. And Melia is using more stuff from the first Xenoblade also. So it's nice to see that they stayed consistent from each of the worlds. That moment in chapter 7, right at the beginning of chapter 7, where Nia is actually explaining what was happening, like, I liked that. I liked the explanation. I liked to see the art, but it didn't feel as satisfying as what I was hoping to be. I don't know exactly why. I think maybe expectations, because we were expecting a lot from this connection since the first trailer. But I just thought that there were a little bit more to that than just what she explained.
Well, it ended up being pretty basic, I guess, right? Ended up being relatively basic and with less crossover than we were probably expecting.
True.
What ended up being is kind of like, hey, the two worlds were merging, which we kind of already knew and were guessed. And the only real new part is like, hey, we made this giant ball so that we could all survive and go back to normal after the worlds merged, but something went wrong and now we have Zed and his goons and they made a new world. So it's not really a whole bunch of like big, huge new revelations. It's certainly not anything on the level of Xenoblade 2 where it's like chapter 10, it's like, hi, here is Klaus.
Yes.
He is the main bad guy of Xenoblade 1. It's like, which I think is a thing that in general is interesting with 3 is that despite being the game that is literally a combination of the previous two, it feels like it has less crossover elements than we were expecting, right?
Yes, the whole thing with Origins is that it creates a completely different world. And it is, in a way, it is completely disconnected. All that we had are cosmetic references. People are from the same race. Yeah, people are from the same race. We have some similar places. We have core crystals, but any of that stuff are not actually functional in the way that we knew in the original games, usually. So it doesn't matter that Lance is a machina. He acts exactly like a human being, and the same thing for the core crystal on Mio. And actually, with Mio, at least her core crystal is a great indication that her mother is actually Nia, because it's exactly the same core crystal. So
yeah, it's literally just flipped upside down.
Exactly. So after the end of the game, I think it's pretty sure that Mio exists in the world of Xenoblade 2, and she's probably the daughter of Nia and
Rex. We could probably spend like a whole half hour just talking about that one picture, because what even?
Okay, let's talk about the actual ending. We discussed the battle with Zet, which I as I said before, I think it was over. I didn't like it much from the sense of gameplay. I think it was a little bit exhausting, to be honest.
It was very long.
Yeah, I think it didn't justify itself, because with Torna, I think Torna had a great final battle that had some different stuff to the battle, and here he only did the stuff of blocking interlink, and we have some in-game cutscenes that doesn't look that good.
I mean, I do think that the whole giant face thing was a little weird and not super interesting. I did like the whole, everything is actually a mech part.
I was expecting that since chapter 1. That's why I played Xenoblade.
Agnes Castle is a mech. The city has a mech. Origin is a mech, and all the giant mechs fight. I think that was fun. I think the whole bringing the heroes in at the end was fun, especially because we actually got to see Melia and Nia as heroes before we actually,
Yeah, that was a great moment.
Post-game. It was super cool seeing Nia pop up and then suddenly you notice the two Aegis swords and like the two water Aegis swords behind her. That was really cool.
I also loved the little touches on Nia's personality, that she's trying to be noble, she's trying to be a queen, but she's still Nia.
Yeah.
And there's this moment,
you're not tired of like talking like that?
Yeah, I love it. And then she goes, let's trash those goons. I love that. But overall, the mech scene, I think by Xenoblade standards, I think it was a little bit weak. It was massive, it was really big, but it was also very stationary. The robots were basically just shooting at this giant mecha at the middle, and the giant mecha barely moved. So if you compare that to Mikhail versus Indo, to Mechanis versus Bionis, or the final, I mean that's the best one, the final mecha battle between Malus and Mithra in the ending of Torna, I think it never come to that level of physicality, you know? The epicness of it all. Right. And maybe this is just a small complaint, but just something that I noticed also.
That's fair. I mean, I liked it personally, but I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Not I was expecting to see that big scale battle moments. And I was thinking, how are they going to do that on this game? And I was happy to see that it still had one of those in this game. The dynamic between Melia and Nia is just so unexpected. I never expected those two characters to interact with each other. So I just love to see them.
Very fun.
Their designs look awesome, Nia and Melia. They look
it's funny.
A little more mature.
It's funny because the thing is, I was accidentally spoiled on the fact that they were post-game heroes, which sucked because I really was not expecting that. Because the whole silhouette thing made me think that, like, just like Xenoblade 2, this was all the heroes we were getting.
Me too. Yeah.
But so I did not know that at all, and the fact that I got spoiled on that made me really disappointed. But it was still really cool to see because I was just expecting them to have, their dresses that we see them in. Like their royal gowns. Yeah. And then they show up in the final fight, which, obviously I did not know. And they have these completely different outfits that are like basically remixes of their base game and Future Connected outfits. And that was just super cool.
Yeah, no, I really like that. When they appeared with their outfits, it was so cool. And to get all the references in the in the outfits and the actual attacks that they did. I mean, Melia does the kick thing.
Yes, I love that she's doing a Starlight kick. That's so good.
Exactly. It was so nice to see that.
It's fun because she still says, like, she still falls over when she does the regular art, but like her chain order has her actually doing it properly.
I mean, so they are aware of the memes. They are aware of the memes. Yeah.
Or when Melia just says, like, this is all for the Future Connected. Like,
she said the thing.
Yeah, she did it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Future Connected was more about getting the Xenoblade 1 parts. Because I think the most thing that we saw from the Xenoblade 1 part of the game were from Future Connected. We saw the new weapon that Melia did. Yes. We saw, I think it was pretty easy to imagine how she became a queen also.
Yep.
And we see the Monado, the Rex Monado at the end of the game. So...
Man. So, like, can we establish that, like, Nia's ending in the game is like, hey, she gets to... she has Poppy as a friend, and we see the photo, and it's like, hey, she managed to get together with Rex. And then we see Melia's ending. It's like, let me stare at this sword of the guy I like that is also probably dead along with all the rest of my friends. It's like, oh.
Oh, it's so... Melia definitely got the bad side.
Why does Melia suffer? Oh.
It's funny because she's already the character famous for suffering, so yeah.
And like, Nia got out of it, but Melia's like, no. You go deeper into that hole.
And even in Melia's quest, like the whole thing with Melia is basically that she learned to cope with sadness already.
Yeah, like Nia's is like, let's go on a fun trip through the world and I'm gonna tell you a whole bunch of anecdotes about my life. And Melia's is like, everyone looking at her and being like, wow, she's lonely. She must be really sad.
Exactly. Everyone thinking, oh my god, she looks so sad. Yeah, but I really enjoyed them. Even if, to be honest, I felt that a lot of stuff from them felt like just fan service for fan service. I still enjoyed a lot just seeing them interacting and stuff like that. And to be honest, nothing felt forced. Even though they are just small nods or small references, they still were a lot fun to watch. And but after the whole fight, we have the actual ending for our characters, and I don't know if everyone was dead, but it took a while to me to realize that the worlds would drift apart.
Yes, that was not really established clearly.
Yes, because they were talking in that scene, that bright scene, looking at the two worlds separated. And I think that's the moment where they make the decision, right? Similar to the end of Xenoblade 1, I think. And
yeah, they never really made clear that the point of origin was to make the two worlds separate again.
yes.
Because the origin was basically just, hey, it's like an arc, and we're going to... Which, by the way, you know, origin is an arc. Main character is called Noah.
Yeah.
That was supposed to, like, save everyone, and then after the intersection happens and everything is destroyed, you know, everyone's still safe in the arc and we can rebuild. But not that, hey, we're going to reestablish two separate worlds. So that was definitely a bit of a, oh, okay, I guess
so when the characters start to talk to each other and they're like, oh, we are never going to see each other again, I'm like, what? It took me a while to actually understand it. So I think I should say that the dialogue in that bit could be a little more clear. Also, the fact that Monica and Gondor are there and they are like, okay, we are going to disappear, no problem.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? That is one thing, that's honestly the one part of that whole ending epilogue scene that genuinely kind of bothers me, is that what happened to the city people?
I mean, they
didn't...
I
didn't
think they
just,
disappeared.
You know... But then, really? Like, you're just gonna establish the entire city and all these people and they're just going to completely vanish. Like, they're all basically dead for all intents and purposes, and it's like, yeah, good. We're all happy about this.
We're happy that you guys are going to return to your lives.
It's weird. I'm going to assume that there's something... I'm going to hope that the post-games, that, like, the DLC story somehow explains this and tells us that, you know, the city people didn't just poof out of existence, because that is that is weird. That's a weird kind of ending to give them.
Because it's weird, and the way that they are just totally fine with this, I think it's a little because I think Noah seems a little preoccupied in the final scene, but they're like, it's okay, and then Mio say, everyone wants the same thing. Okay. And
I didn't really like living. It's a little long. It's fine.
But the thing is, everyone in the city is still. I mean, the original founders, they still were from Agnes and Kevis in some points, right? So
that's why they have the irises. Yeah, that's why they have the irises in specific eyes.
Yes. So they are still from origin in some way or form. So we can assume that in some way or another, the descendants from the city, they exist in one of those two worlds from Xenoblade 1 and 2. So, like, could be that, like, they are okay because their descendants are going to live, and they shouldn't have existed in first place after all. It's I think it's a complex problem that the game failed to actually analyze in a more specific way, maybe. It's really Matrix, right? I think by the end I got the impression that it was a little bit like Matrix, like, yeah, stuff actually happened, but the world was kinda simulated.
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually thinking for a while now that this was a Matrix scenario, not in the way that it actually ended up being, because my theory was based on the DLC expansion art that with like the swords, that you would have Ionios being a simulation and like Shulk and Rex and other people on the outside trying to break it. So obviously it's not like that. Yeah. But it's still funny that I end up retaining.
It's not that
sort
far,
of, like,
actually.
Yeah, it's still sort of like that kind of simulation aspect of it, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I think going back to the ending, like, just in terms of general impressions of it, I'm not entirely sure. Like, obviously we talked about how stuff like with the city was a little weird, but in terms of general thoughts on it, I personally really liked it. because it, even though it was not, the big crossover ending, the ending of all endings, like the conclusive end to the Klaus saga, and we know everything that happened with the Conduit or whatnot, I still felt like this was a really good self-contained ending. Which is funny because it's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect with 2, where that game seemed like it would be entirely self-contained and end up being very connected. But this one doesn't have many connections or crossovers, but I think it was a very solid self-contained ending. Like, everything that happens to the characters feels like a good resolution. They come to terms with what they're going to do. They have all their separate arcs where they talk about, splitting up. Taion gives Uni like the little... I love the interaction with Taion and Uni. I think arguably more than the one with Noah and Neo, just because the whole thing with giving her the little booklets, like, hey, these are all things from like your world, so you can hold on to it and you can keep it. Then Uni's like, oh, you're like my 4th favorite friend. And Taion's like, oh god.
I love that moment.
But yeah, I really liked the ending, ignoring, the parts with Zed that were kind of not necessarily the best, and ignoring the lack of crossovers. I think it was a good ending.
I agree. I think the most important thing is being thematically coherent, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the game actually was. The final message actually works. You see the worlds drifting apart, and we end with that, with Noah's monologue, a small monologue by the end, and I think it really hit home. It's a great message overall. I think that whole sequence where they are interacting with each other, just saying goodbye, it was a really nice ending.
It's very bittersweet, which is also funny because it's like the first bittersweet ending we've had in the Xenoblade game.
Exactly.
Both 1 and 2 were like, basically all was well. And here it's like, well, I mean, everything's good, but also like...
And it's funny because on Xenoblade 2, I wasn't expecting a bittersweet ending because the game was a little more happy. But they actually fool you into thinking that this is a bittersweet ending before the credits. And then, of course, you get the happy ending by the actual end. Now, on Xenoblade 3, I would actually expect a bittersweet ending because this is a way more serious tone game and overall the tone of the story. But I was actually got by surprise. I wasn't expecting the words to drift you apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just also a matter of, like, these characters have suffered so much.
Yes.
It feels almost unfair to be like, okay, well, you never get to see each other again.
Yes, it felt a little sudden, like, oh, yes, seriously. Like,
oh.
I'm completely devastated now.
Yeah.
Yes. But at least they actually got a kiss, which was something that... I mean... Shook kinda did, but not in the proper way.
I mean, he got one like halfway through the game.
Oh my god, yeah. But no, it was a beautiful scene. Overall, the whole direction. I also liked Noah throwing the sword away. At a first moment, I was a little confused, but then I was like, okay, he never liked fighting. He never liked to use a sword that could kill people and stuff like that. So he's actually saying goodbye to that life. And in that sense, I really liked.
Yeah, it also makes sense when you consider that, like, the worlds are splitting apart, so it's not like it would have mattered if he held onto it.
Yeah, of course. So he really doesn't need it anymore.
Yeah, because there's definitely a thought of like, oh, you're just throwing Lucky 7 away. The thing that is potentially a Monado of some kind. Like, oh, okay.
This also gave a little less importance to the sword, right?
Yes.
I mean, technically, Shulk also doesn't have the Monado at the end of Xenoblade 1, so he just doesn't throw away, but he doesn't have the
He just makes
Monado.
his own.
Yeah, he makes his own, guys, like that. But yeah, I think the ending is really nice, and when the credits end and the initial scene of the game really continues, I actually understood what was going on. So the whole game basically happens in like 1 second or something like that.
Yeah.
And I like the concept. I think it's a great idea for a story. It's a plot twist that really gets you, and it connects in a great way with the start of the game. And I think you mentioned that this initial area looks like Colony 9, and it probably is, right? The Colony 9.
I really think it is.
Yes.
It feels, I mean, even though the Colony 9 in Ionios is different, that's still where Noah, Uni, and Lands are from, and I think it's very intentional. So I would be willing to bet that the area that the kids are in like the initial world is definitely a new, or just like an older Colony 9.
Yeah. I think it has some similarities to the one at the final scene on Xenoblade 1. I think it's definitely a version of that in the future. And we can see that the Alchemoth is also there, so it's probably after Future Connected, they probably brought Alchemoth close to Colony 9, so it makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the other nice thing is that the ending is bittersweet, but in that kind of epilogue section where we see them back as kids in the original world, it does have some kind of hopeful note through young Noah hearing the Agnian flute and kind of just going towards that. That gives the impression of, hey, the worlds were split apart, but it's not... They're going to meet again. There's still something that will happen that will let them meet again.
It was meaningful, yes. I think that's the whole idea, to give the player that sensation that, hey, all of this actually happened.
Yeah. From a lore perspective, I feel like what is actually going on is that Origin... Like... Because I think... It would be a little weird and maybe a little bit unsatisfying to have the world kind of reset to the status quo with the two universes. And I also feel like it might not make as much sense, because what would there be to prevent another intersection from happening if the two universes were made separate again? So my theory is that what happened is that that Origin reconstructed the two worlds, but within the same universe. So you basically have just two different planets going on. And that's going to, they're eventually going to be able to interact again, because they're now in the same universe.
Yeah, that would be a nice explanation for a DLC that is a continuation, right?
Or even a future game. If, we want to delve back into the sci-fi, you could have something where you go between the planets or something.
I think the issue with the ending to me is more about expectations, because... Takahashi said that this was the ending of Claw's saga of the starting, and if we look from that perspective, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 would probably be a spin-off, because if you really think about it, nothing here actually affects the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 in a meaningful way. I mean, of course, a lot has happened, but in the grand scheme of things, it was designed kind of this story that does not affect a lot the main stuff going on,
Yeah, which I think is part of the reason why a lot of people are a little bit disappointed, is because there was absolutely the expectation of, hey, we're going to, something is going to happen, right? Like, we're either going to learn more about Kloss, or we're going to learn more about the Conduit, or there's going to be something with like Zanza or the Aegis or something, and we really didn't get that.
He even mentioned that he thought about this story after finishing during the development of Xenoblade 2. So I don't see that.
Yeah, my only real guess is that, and I don't know if this is likely to happen, and even if it does, I doubt you could argue there are problems with it, but that he made Xenoblade 3 relatively self-contained for a reason, because he didn't want to, he wanted it to be self-contained. He didn't want to scare off new players that didn't play the other two games.
Right.
But he left the future story expansion, which we know is going to sort of involve Shulk and Rex in some way because of the two swords, and that is going to be something that that's going to be what we wanted, right? Like, that is going to be the thing that says, hey, these are the big crossovers, these are the answers, this is what you wanted out of the thing, because now I don't have to worry about new players being scared off by me throwing a whole bunch of elements from the other two games.
Because
this
it's not the main game.
Optional DLC content. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping, although you could also argue there's kind of problems with that, where you'd be putting like the main sort of draw and crossover of the game in DLC rather than putting it in the main game, which I'm sure could kind of rub some people the wrong way. Because like Torna was DLC, but it was also very much optional. It was just a prequel. Whereas if this one was like a genuine, hey, here are the big connections with the games, I could imagine some people being unhappy because it feels a little bit more main story-esque, .
Yes, I can see that. At the same time, I don't, because it's that problem that we even discussed about Kingdom Hearts, right? Of leaving important information in like mobile games or spin-offs and stuff like that. I hope that he has a clever solution to that. Even if you look at Torna, every single game, Future Connected or Torna, every single game for Takahashi, he tries to make the story self-contained.
Yeah.
So even if he brings stuff back for the DLC, I think he'll try at least to explain. Because with Xenoblade 3, I think you can pretty much play it without 1 and 2.
Yeah, honestly, there's very little that you would miss out on, which is funny because it's definitely not what you would have expected, but it really is a pretty good self-contained story.
Maybe for some moments it even works better, because I even discussed this with you. But in chapter 6, when D actually hits Nia, I was like,
you're like, well, she's just gonna come back, so.
I was like, oh my god. And then I was so focused on Nia that I didn't want to know a lot about D&D, so it kind of took me out of that moment. So if the person doesn't have the connection, and like, even if you never played 1 and 2, the game makes pretty clear that the queens are important. So I don't think they feel like hollow characters if you never knew them. I think it also, like, let's say you played Xenoblade 3 and then you play Xenoblade 2. I think it would be very neat to see Nia again in a different way.
You would probably be incredibly confused about the small blue-haired robot jumping out of the machine and the photo showing the guy with, like, the 3 girls and the 3 babies. You would probably really wonder what's going on with that, but...
Yeah, that would bring some questions for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the fact that they only showed both of this stuff right at the end of the game makes pretty sure that they are holding back to not take the focus of the actual story in this game. I think they didn't want to put Rex or Shulk in the story too. Nia and Melia were already enough, and Nia and Melia, in the context of this game, they are completely in this game. They do not talk about stuff from past games, at least in the main story, right? So they are pretty much in the context of the game. Very small
and they're established
nods.
at the start. They're established at the start as being like the queens, and that's what's important. These are people that, like, the 2 countries are worshipping, and they're super important, and that's all you really need to know.
Exactly. So I think even in that context, they work pretty well, and they are great characters nonetheless. But yeah, I'm thinking about if we have more stuff to talk about the ending.
Yeah. I think there is something interesting, just in terms of potential thoughts for, like, whatever an expansion is. One thing that I ended up looking up because I was curious is the different Mobius. There are a lot of Mobius throughout the game, because there's the entire alphabet.
I think there's the whole alphabet almost, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's the entire alphabet except for one specific letter, and that letter is A. You have every single Mobius except for letter A, which is really odd because, like, you wouldn't have gone through the effort of having a Mobius for every single letter and then just, forget one. So there is something going on there, and I don't know if it's going to be, in future quests, because we are going to get, I think it's 2 extra heroes through quests, if maybe it's going to be tied into that, or if it's tied into something a little bit more important, like, for instance, the story DLC. And thinking of, for me, the first thing that comes to mind, and this just might be, my dumb theory brain, is Alvis. Because we don't see any of the Aegises, and, like, in terms of important A characters that are technically still alive, Alvis is, the number 1 candidate for me.
It's a pretty good guess. I think, I thought you were going to say Aegis, but Alvis makes more sense because it's his actual
Aegis
name.
would work too, technically. I mean, Aegis would work. Although, actually, because I think the Mobius keep the same letters between Japanese and English, and the Aegis in Japanese is a different word, I think. So I guess Alvis would make more sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. True. I think they'll probably tie into that because we're still going to receive some more contents, and I would guess the heroes, of course, will receive heroes quests. So it'll be very interesting to see the path that they're going with that. I'm pretty sure that the DLC will be an epilogue because it has the Monado and And here's the thing, right? That scenes in the end when Melia is looking at the Monado and Nia is looking at the photo and finds it Poppy. It's like, I think it almost feels as a like open space to a epilogue or a continuation to that, you know, showing just those small bits. Like, oh, I know you were looking for that the whole game. Here it is.
There's a reason that, you know, from Melia's side we see specifically something tying to Shulk, and from Nia's side we see something that ties heavily to Rex.
Yes, for sure. I think it definitely feels like he's setting up something. And about, but this is also interesting. I was really surprised to see Poppy and the moments, and she looks basically the same.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the same model, honestly.
I think it is just a different shading. Pretty much, it has the, because they use a lot of models in the world of the game, so it's not something completely out of place. But the interesting thing about Origin is that it is implied that Tora helped to build it from the side of Xenoblade 2. And considering that Tora was already built an artificial blade, and which means that he was basically the character most close to God in Xenoblade 2 because he created the blade. I think he pretty much used like the technology that they learned from Claws or something like that to create the Origin.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. It does make me wonder who built it on the Xenoblade 1 side. I mean the question is really like, how many years passed between the end of Xenoblade 1 or Xenoblade 2 and the intersection happening? Because Napon have longer lifespans, so it's possible that Tora lived longer than, say, Rex did. But like we don't know, because from Melia's side quest and whatnot, it kind of seems like everyone in the Xenoblade 1 cast is basically dead.
Yeah, that's weird.
And she's alone, but I don't know if that makes sense, because then like Rex would probably also be dead. And like it's just weird. It's a little weird.
It's fun. We cannot have a proper. We don't know, because we have the photo. So with the photo, we know that Hex actually got old and that he had 3 babies. Mm-hmm. But we don't know if that photo is old for Nia. It's not made clear, so we don't know exactly how many years have passed. I saw some people commenting that the party members from Xenoblade 1 and 2 probably were born in Ionios. And I can see that maybe Zet made them stop being reborn because they tried to do something, or they were with the founders, related to the founders.
Oh, the founders is a whole other thing.
Yes. But I think it could be something related to that, because Melia and Nia have been living in the Worlds of Origins for years, I imagine.
Yes.
I don't know if they actually say something that could make clear, but we know that many lives already lived in that.
Yeah, it's been like thousands, I think, is what they say.
Yes.
Like, it's been a really long time in Ionios.
It's weird. Did you notice in the Cloud Keep that Dromark head is in the door?
Wait, really?
You never saw that?
No, I didn't notice that. Oh, I'm gonna have to look for that now.
Go back to the Cloud Keep, and right before entering in Nia's chambers, in the place that she is sleeping, look at the top of the door. There's the head of a tiger, which is pretty much
that's amazing.
Dromark. I don't know if it's actually Dromark. I hope it's not, but it's just a head of the tiger.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to say something.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the whole idea of the party being in Ionios, again, that just depends, like, how much time has passed. Are they still alive? Or, like, what's going on? And then, like you said, the founders is a whole question mark, because it's a big question of, like, hey, are these founders just references, or are they supposed to be kind of literal in a sense? Because there's some odd stuff going on with them, and it's not even entirely clear who all of them are.
Yes, it's weird, because it feels like they are giving us enough hints to think about other characters, but at the same time they are giving us info to completely unrelate than to those other characters.
Yeah,
So
it's so weird. And like because you can sort of, there's some big similarities, right? We have 7 founders.
Right.
One is completely unknown, which is another question in of itself. But like we have one that looks a lot like Shulk, is a like mechanic. He built his own sword, whatever, and he lived to 80. And he was with another person who is from Agnes, I think, who has a ponytail, and she also lived to 80, but she doesn't seem like anyone at first. And then you have 2 of them where it's their mentors and not them. And one of the mentors is basically Dunban. He like lost an arm, and he uses a giant red sword. And then the other one is like maybe Zeke, maybe Rex, where they have an eye patch. They have like hair that looks like Zeke, and they wield 2 swords, which could be like Rex, and he has 2 Aegis swords. Then there's like 2 other ones. There's like one is a Van Damme, and he has Noah's chin, and he fought N, and he could be a Fae reference from Xenogears, because the whole ponytail, the hairstyle in general, the fact that he fights with his fists. And then there's the other one, which is just a cat girl, and I think it said that she is the sister of the Van Damme guy, but no more details. And there's just a lot. There's just a lot.
It's weird because there's a lot of information to read there. So I don't think they are just putting that for references.
It's hard. It's hard. It's very difficult to tell what is going on. I have seen some good ideas, like another thing that isn't super addressed is N and M's kid. What happens to them? And I think a general common theory is that they ended up in the city, which makes sense, and they ended up having, you know, several kids and whatever, and that the founders, the Van Damme and the cat ear girl, are N and M's descendants, basically, which it would explain why one has a chin that looks like Noah, and I think the cat ear girl, Lance says, looks like Mio. I don't know if that's just referring to the ears, but yeah.
Yeah,
so
because she looks kind of different. She looks, the hair looks a little bit different.
It's funny because it actually looks like one of Nia's beta arts. Yeah, exactly.
I thought the same thing.
Exactly. So I guess, you know, with Mio being Nia's daughter, that could be a little reference there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then even if, you know, those 2 are like canonically this is who they are, the other 4 is just, we have no idea. 2 of them are statues of the mentors, so not even them. And then the other 2 are like Shulk, and then a girl with a ponytail.
Yes.
And like especially the girl with the ponytail, I cannot place. The only thing that I saw that might be it is that like is if the ponytail, like the hairstyle in general, is a reference to Numa, they could be one of Rex's children, and that the Shulk guy could be like Shulk and Fiora's kid, because I don't think it would be literally Shulk, since that Shulk or that founder gets together with the ponytail girl, and I don't think Takahashi would ship Shulk with someone else when Fiora exists.
Yeah, even though he made Rex and Nia, but okay. I think Shulk is a different character.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also the fact that those founders specifically managed to find a way to break the term cycle and live to 80, which is also not addressed in the game at all.
Because
like,
that's probably how our bros started or something like that. Because they managed to get out of the flow, and all the descendants also got out. How that happens, how Zet let that happen, it's
which is super weird, because like when I first got to the city and I read that, I'm like, oh, this is obviously going to tie into how they get Mio to survive, right? Like, obviously.
Exactly. I thought the same thing. Yes. Never thought that she would become Mobius.
And when the characters don't even mention it, it's like, but you could at least ask. You can read. You can read that these people escaped and try and like learn about it.
Yeah, it's weird that they never addressed that. And even Melia and Nia, I don't think there's a reason why they are immortals in this world, right? It's not clear if they were created by origin or if they somehow managed to not be affected by it.
So I think the way that I interpreted that is that because they have the keys to Origin, which we don't entirely know what they are.
Oh, right.
I think I
right.
saw a theory that seems kind of interesting, that the keys are Aegis cores, which I think could be interesting. But
Yeah, makes sense.
like because they have that kind of authority over Origin, they were able to kind of, survive, quote unquote, the process, and were still like physically there when the whole thing with Zed happened, where they captured Melia. And I think at that point, no, Nia went into stasis, like some form of cryostasis, which is how she managed to survive that long.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And Melia managed to survive because Zed needed her alive to be able to control Origin, because he needed her key.
Yes.
And so he probably did something similar to Nia, where he put her into some kind of stasis so that she would survive and not age, so that he could keep using Origin. That's how I interpret it, at least.
I think the keys in these games are kind of like a monado, or as you said, an Aegis core, which gives you like all the administrative permissions in that world.
Yeah,
and that could even explain why Luck 7 is the way that it is, because Melia could probably made the weapon be basically the monado of the world.
Yeah, same thing with the Ouroboros, because it seems odd that Nia would be able to just, make these superpowered beings, but if it's partly the power of an Aegis core or the conduit, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. I wonder why Noah. Because if Mio is Nia's daughter, I can imagine why she would be important.
Mm-hmm.
But why Noah would be important? I don't think they ever addressed that.
Honestly, I'm not sure if he is, because the only thing important about him is that he can wield the Sword of the End, the Sword of Origin.
But why?
Why? I don't know. Because he's pure of heart. It's a Keyblade. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be something to that level just because he's such a good person. I mean, and is not.
Well, because like at first we thought with the whole time freezing thing, since Noah was the only one that could move, oh, maybe he's a special boy. There's something going on. He's special, whatever. But I mean, not really.
It's funny because he was the only one that noticed when time stopped, right?
Yeah, but it still didn't make a difference afterwards, because time continued, and he was he didn't really notice a difference then, and he didn't really notice a difference when he was in Ionios. But he's still referred to as being the wielder of the Sword of the End, so it does make him come off as being special in some regard, just it's not clear how.
Yeah. Many questions. I even said to someone who was like at chapter 5 and was like, oh, I hope I'll get a lot of answers. And I also don't want to ruin your experience for anyone, but I just said, like, I think you should focus a little more on the characters and their feelings, because I get that this was what Takahashi was really putting most effort in this story. And to be fair, with Xenoblades in general, this is usually the big focus. The lore stuff is more small tidbits that we get here and there. Maybe the issue with this one was our expectations and how much stuff they set up. So again, I saw some people saying that the story feels incomplete. I don't know about that. I can see why they're saying that, and they are hoping that the DLC will complete the story. But I don't know. I don't see Takahashi actually making a story to finish with the DLC, right? Mm-hmm. I think this was the story that he wanted to tell, and maybe some of the large stuff he will complete later.
Yeah, I think a lot of us wanted it to be more than it was, which I think is, it's understandable to some degree, because like we've mentioned, this was supposed to be, or this is like the big conclusion to the Klaus saga, essentially. But yeah, I mean, I actually had a very similar experience where I also told a friend after I beat the game, like, hey, you probably shouldn't go in expecting it to be like this huge, giant crossover thing that has like all these different things going on. Klaus is not going to come in riding on like a Bionis-shaped giant mech, wielding like 2 conduits. Like, this is a self-contained narrative, and you will probably enjoy it if you treat it more as such. And I think that's probably what Takahashi was aiming to do as well.
Yeah, probably. And, his interviews are always weird. Maybe he was just trying to I don't know, to change our expectations, even if it is pretty weird to say that stuff. And there's also a lot of misinterpretation with those interviews that are translated from Japan, so don't know about that also. Overall, I just think that, like, I want to criticize the game. I want to talk about the stuff that I thought that could be better. But at the same time, it's my favorite game of this year. It's one of the best games that I've ever played, for sure. And, man, the cast is so good. I love those characters. They did such a great job.
I think I think we can basically all agree that this is the best cast of any of the Xenoblade games.
Yes.
Right? Like, I don't think that's exactly a controversial opinion.
No. You can see that they put the efforts. And part of the reason why I was a little disappointed by the end was because of that, because it was so good up to that point, like 70% of the experience. Something that I noticed, the Mio and Noah's relationship. If you look at it from the beginning of the game, right at the climax of chapter 5, their relations kind of they are slowly getting closer, they're slowly talking more to each other and making questions. You can see that their relationship is actually building. And then after chapter 5 and 6, the whole thing happens. They see a lot of crazy stuff from the memories of the past. And they never stop to actually talk about it. To have more of a heart-to-heart, or to actually speak about it. Hey, I saw a memory that we had a baby. Crazy, huh? Something like that,
Yeah.
I had the feeling that and then we go directly to the kiss at the end. But I have the feeling that we had that gap in their relationship that I was hoping to see them growing a little more closer. Like the scene at chapter 4 where Mio is super anxiety because she's going to die and stuff like that. More moments like that,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the way that they treated was basically like an implied, like, hey, they both know what happened and so they're closer because of it, because they do kind of act closer from it. But I agree they definitely would have helped to have some kind of discussion of like, hey, so like that's wild, right? Like
and not only that, but explaining to the rest of the party. There's even this moment where Tyon says, I can more or less grasp what's going on here, but you guys have to explain later. But if they ever explain, it was off camera, because you never actually saw that.
Well, Mio did explain how the new hairdo was just too annoying to keep, so...
Yeah. That's another fun thing. I think we even discussed with that the hair thing was the tradition of choosing something in the Xenoblade games. Like, it was not like...
I guess the new tradition now.
Yeah. At least, because in Xenoblade 2 you have to choose a true actually human being, so it was actually a little harder, I would say. But here it's more of a cosmetic choice. And I chose the longer hair, but at the end of the game I chose the short hair. And I think with you was kind of the inverse, right?
Yeah, well, I saw that and I'm like, oh god. Because I like the long hair, but I feel like it also makes more thematic sense for her to have the short hair, since she's her own person. So I actually went ahead and looked it up, like, hey, is this reversible? Like, can I swap between? Because I really like the look of the long hair, and thankfully you can, which is one thing that I'm really happy about, is they give you that option. So I picked the long hair and tried that for 20 minutes, and then I switched back to the short hair. Because it did feel a little bit more right. But now that I'm in the post-game, I switched back to long hair, so...
It makes sense. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the pre-rendered cutscenes at the end are with short hair.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, the game kind of says that this is the right answer right by the end.
It's funny because even if you pick the long hair at first and you just keep going a little bit, I think it's once you're about to enter Upper Edia, there's like one of those overworld party dialogues where Mio is saying like, oh, I really wish I had cut my hair.
I never saw that.
Yeah, it's like, well, you kind of make it real obvious what you wanted us to do there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw a streamer who was like, I really like the long hair, but I feel like the character don't want to use it. And the chat has always a lot of people who are like long hair team, and they're like, this is not a real person. And she's like, to me it is. Yeah, but it was fun that they gave us the choice. I think that those nice touches are always something fun.
Yeah, I hope they give us the option to give her the console costume, at some point because it was pretty stylish.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the standard console costume with Trinton, with his class, right? You can give that to everyone. But it was weird that she did not actually have the Mobius costume. Yeah, man, overall, a lot of stuff. I feel like there's still stuff to talk about, but
Yeah, I mean, the side quests were great, just in general.
yeah, there was a lot. I think this was the one that I did the most side quests from Xenoblade.
They feel definitely more accessible, I guess. There's not like a whole bunch, but they're for the most part they're not too much of a pain to go through. You definitely don't have any like bearing her soul style quests, which is thank God. But I think otherwise, I'd say they're about, they're similar to 2 in that they're all good. They expand the characters a bit. The fact that there's an affinity chart really helps with that because it's, it's a very direct way of tracking that, which is nice. Even if the rewards you get from the quests they're good, but man, gold is useless.
Yes. I never had a problem with it.
Yeah, you barely even use it. Like, the only thing I've really used gold on is the fabricators to, like, farm for certain items, but that's it.
Every time I got to a new colony, I bought all of their accessories, but just because I wanted to have... I think this was something from Xenoblade 2 that I did, because you had to buy one of single one to get the deeds.
Right,
so I kind of did that automatically every time that I reach a new colony, but... Yeah, not a lot to use it. I think the Nopal coins were probably more valuable because
definitely.
You have that Nopal that sold many great accessories with Nopal coins, and you can use to get class ranks. Some people had troubles with that because it feels a little like what those gacha games did, but I do not have an issue. I like to have an alternate way to do that stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, it's not like, there are microtransactions or anything. It's just like, hey, if you want a shortcut because you don't want to farm a bunch of enemies to grind out the class points, you have an alternative. I personally really like that.
Yeah, me too. Overall, I had a great experience, and I think the in the department of the side quests, this game they really put a lot of efforts, a lot of side quests with voice acting, with cutscenes, and all that stuff. As we said at the beginning. Characters. Yes, we had the side stories, which I think it's a great way to give more development to some characters outside of the main story. And because, we did not have heart-to-hearts, which I'm still... I'm not 100% sure. I won't say that I missed them, like I felt that the game had to have them, but I'm still a little bit unsure why they removed them, the heart-to-hearts.
I would have liked having them. I think they did a good enough job with like the discussions and just the general cutscenes that they didn't feel sorely missed because you still had a ton of party interaction. Arguably, I feel like the party interaction we had in this game was deeper than any of the games in which we did have heart-to-hearts.
True.
They really weren't necessary, but it is a thing where like, well, it is a bit of a shame that they didn't bring them back.
Yeah, but I can kind of see that. In fact, the game had a lot of voice dialogue. And in the side quests and stuff like that, so I can see why they decided to do. I like the fact that some side quests are like a chain of side quests. The one that I can remember the most is with that guy from Colony 4 and the Nopon.
Yeah, Doran and Bam Bam, I think.
Yeah, they were a funny one.
Yeah,
I just like the chain of those side quests, and the Affinity Charge also helps with that because you remember those characters, like some NPCs like. The racist from Colony 4, I think is Jeremy, his name.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it's Jeremy. There was this guy from the city which was in love with Monica, I think it's Jensen.
Yes.
So just some small characters that really I got into my mind because they kept appearing on the side quests.
Even like the the non-hero NPCs are still pretty memorable. There's the one music guy in City, Boomer.
Who never talks. And then he appears again in the Miyabi's Ascension quest.
The cooking.
Yes.
Yeah. It is a bit of a shame we didn't have more towns for all the characters to be in because we mostly had like the colonies and all the Ferrances. And I did love that we had a whole bunch of different designs for the Ferrances. But it would have been nice to have a few more towns because even like aside from the city, we have basically just like the Kevis Castle Town, which is at the very end of the game, and there's almost nothing in it.
Yeah, I was like, with that, because here's the thing. I'm a little bit disappointed that there's no cities, but I also understand that the world in this game is like this. Like, it makes sense to be like this, only the colonies and stuff like that, and they don't have cities. So I can kind of see it, but I miss the feeling of exploring this gigantic world with different cultures that we had with Xenoblade 2. I think even 1 we had a little bit more, like getting to Alchemoth, it was like a completely different place.
Yeah, building Colony 6, getting to Frontier Village, and Alchemoth, then the Fallen
And
Arm.
I really wished, because with Xenogears, you start like in a small city as usual with a JRPGs, but there are moments that you are in space, in a space city, and I would really love to see that. Like, it's this big, because here's the thing, right? When I saw the first trailers and some of the parallels with Xenogears and all that stuff, I felt like the Mobius probably lived in a big city with a lot of privilege and stuff, but it seems that they were all just stuck inside a theater the whole time.
Yeah, Zed just made like a little mansion for himself and has like he's a big movie buff. Like,
oh, that's another thing, right? I found really interesting when we actually got to the front of the theater, because it has an architecture completely different from everything else in the origin. But you only got to see one room. It would be cool to see the other parts and stuff like that. But yeah, I think as we've been discussing during this, a lot of the stuff I really think that is valid criticism, and the game could have done better. But also a lot of this stuff is because of expectations. Because we are in a series, in the third entry of the series, so this is a point that a lot of people are already very familiar with the tropes, with what to expect from the game and stuff like that. So when Takahashi is trying to do stuff differently, it's okay. Not everything will actually work. I actually got the impression with Xenoblade 3, now talking about the cutscenes in general, he was trying to make it less like resolving everything with action scenes, right? With Xenoblade 2, a lot of the best moments, a lot of the most emotional moments were doing battle. The characters were battling and having conversations and stuff like that, which is very anime, of course. And I had the feeling that here, as I said before, he was very poetic at all moments. The final battle with Zed, instead of giving the final slash, you have N and M coming out as spirits and going to, I don't know, to end him, something like that. Yeah. It just felt more like of ideas instead of the physical things.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, I mean, let's not ignore the fact that the fight scenes we do get, like, anytime there are Ouroboros on screen, the fight scenes are amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
Like, they're so good. And then you have, like, the Mio punch, which might be one of the best scenes in the game.
And that's the thing, right? I think yesterday I was rewatching the ends of Chapter 1 with when you first met D&D and you see Vanden and all that stuff. That scene is really, really good. Like, the action is really good. The Mobius looks completely terrifying in that scene. And you can really feel that they were doing, like, they working to the max. And when you compare that, to the other scenes with D&D in the ends of Yoran's arc, you just feel that it is different, right? The way that they do the action moments and stuff like that just feels like it's a bit of a different game by the end. I just, now that you mentioned, because I said, there's not so many action scenes. Actually, there's a lot. I think I'm saying, because there's this at the end of Chapter 1, and then the end of Chapter 2 is the one that we break the flamecock of Colony 4, correct? Yep. Yes, that's a great scene. Yeah,
it's super good. And then you have the same thing with Lambda, where you have them fighting the colony itself and like flipping it over and
yes.
But I think
and
you're
Colony
right.
4 has like a lot of yes.
Yeah, but I think you're right in that the emotional moments are definitely, like, the non-action emotional moments are definitely more emphasized. Like, obviously we talked about the whole Chapter 5, Chapter 6 moment at length, but even there's other moments as well. Like you had mentioned the moment when Mio talks to Noah in the Map of the Ruins. which is a really big emotional moment. There's everything when you first get to the city, especially when the characters first get to see a baby, which is like,
oh, I love that scene.
Yeah, it's a really good scene. It also helps show how much of a dork Taion actually is, which I really liked.
Man, at that point, I was completely in love with his character. It was really, really
Taion
good
is so good.
Yes.
There's this fantastic discussion where they talk about the fashion they have in the city, and like Taion was like, oh, I wonder what people in the city think of our clothes, and Noah's like, I hope we aren't offensive, and like, oh god. He's like, they start talking about picking out their stuff, and Taion's like, I have picked for maximum efficiency. And he's like, oh yeah, well your scarf's done. Taion's like, what the hell did you say? It's the best scarf.
It was like... No, those moments are really nice. I love the cultural shock that we had in the city. That whole sequence was really, really interesting to see. So many things that it's normal for us, for human beings, but in the context of those characters, it was completely something completely new.
Yeah, like when there's Gray's Ascension quest where you meet his wife, and Noah goes up to them and is like, babies? Have you got babies?
Was so good, I remember that. Yeah, no, the side quests in the city are some of the best ones, to be honest. The side quests and the story quests, I really liked the dynamic that we had there. A lot of the characters and the city. It was one of, I think, my favorite places in the whole game.
Yeah, it helps that it's also like the first real, city that you actually get to, right? Like, it gives a completely different vibe.
When we had that scene on Chapter 6 that they're going to destroy the city, I was like, oh no, Takahashi is making this again. I can't believe that. I should make the side quest. And then they are back, no, it's okay. Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a great moment. I think one character that we didn't talk about, and I think it's a weird character. It's Shania.
Yeah.
She's very important during Chapter 5, during Chapter 6. And I don't know, I think at the end of the day I like her as a character. Of course I don't like her as a person, but I like her as a character because I like the perspective of someone who is like, oh, the life with Mobius is better. Like, I want to be reborn.
Yeah, in terms of talking about this whole idea of, this battle of concepts and ideologies, she represents something completely different from what we've seen, which is like hey, I benefit from this in some way because I want to redo my life. And I absolutely hated her at first because she
kept getting worse and worse.
Oh, she's so evil. Like betraying the prison is like, okay, that's annoying, but whatever. But then the whole thing with the prison, where she goes up to you and is like, I've gotten my little thing, and I'm going to be reincarnated on the same day that your friend dies. It's like, oh, you.
Yes. I think it's one of the few moments where Noah is like actually angry.
Yeah.
When he looks at her, yeah.
Did you do Senna's Ascension quest?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I really like, because like I said, at first I really hated her, because I also feel like she doesn't get that much characterization to like show how or why exactly she's doing what she's doing.
Yeah.
But in typical Takahashi fashion, the villains get, sad backstories, and you get to learn a little bit more about her and her relationship with Gondor and whatnot. And, you get to sympathize with her, and I thought that was nice.
Yeah, that was a little bit better, because even though the character is completely like a shit person to the very end, like for example, Amalthus. Amalthus is a great example. No one actually likes Amalthus as a person, but I think he's a very complex character, and I like how he's conflicted all the time and stuff like that. And I like those kind of villains. And when we see Shania, and I think the thing that really gets you in the Senna's side story is when you see that her family, her mother, was like really shitty with her.
Yeah. And
I think this really brings her trauma and everything that the character had to go through. It brings a little bit of sympathy to her. And even we were talking about Zet, and I think this would be a good motivation if Zelda would explain those words. I think he even tries to say something like that in the final game. The game, he shows some of the Shania images, and he says like, oh, my world gives you another chance, or something along those lines, but it was not very convincing.
They just try and make him come off as like too evil for that to really work.
Yeah. I think it's something to that. It lacks a little bit of actually human emotion. But yeah, Shania kinda dies 2 times in the game, so I think
Yeah.
she actually got what she deserved because she
mean,
laid up a lot of shitty stuff.
And the second, she's like dead because she turned to a Mobius
Yeah.
first. So
She's not returning. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So it's the worst one. The suicide moments, which I think it's a bit of a heavy moment for a Xenoblade game, but
Yep.
when you see in the context that she knows that she's going to be reborn, she was kind of seen in that light.
it was funny though to be
Yeah.
like, oh, so that's why the rating mentioned that. From all that time ago of like mentions of suicide. Like, oh, okay.
Not only that, but they also contemplate that idea, right? There's this scene where Taion talks about suicide, and it makes a lot of sense because in a world like this, of course, people will think about suicide, because the only reason that they live is to fight.
Yep.
And it's also an interesting take.
And then you also explore several ideologies within that of like, you have Colony 11, for example, which has basically gone in a completely different direction, and they've embraced all of this combat and this war and this conflict. Which, you know, that doesn't necessarily make them likable because of that, but it's an understandable result of what the world is like.
Yeah, no, I like that. As I said to you, I like how they made the colonies the variety of the colonies. Yeah, they are very interesting. Each one of them has their own issues, their own mindsets, and I like that. Even for example, with Lambda, you do the quest and you see how much problem they have with bureaucracy because everyone wants to get everything approved by the superiors and stuff like that. It's just an interesting way to bring back those topics.
Yeah, the game is very good at kind of keeping its thematic thread throughout the entire thing, even when it comes to side quests.
I think it's probably the most coherent Xenoblade experience in general, I think.
Yeah.
It's just overall the story. You can see that the plan was very clear since the beginning to the themes that they want to tackle, the story, and stuff like that. I think we talk about the music, but not in a very specific way. I think overall, I'm still, because here's the thing, right? Usually when I'm playing, I'm not absorbing all the music in a very good way because I'm hearing through the TV, and sometimes there's all the sound effects with the music, so I'm not actually appreciating. But there are definitely moments where I could action moments or the music, the Mobius music, everyone know it's amazing. With the core and the many different remixes that you see during the game. Some of the more emotional moments in the game also have some great scenes. I think we hear only 2 times the counterattack of this game, right? Chapter 2, chapter 4.
Sure. Yeah, we don't hear it super often.
Yes. But you have a lot of songs, there are a lot of specific music.
It's funny though, because for the most part, like, I really like the battle themes in the game, and some of the cutscene themes are really good too, but I feel like the area themes, for the most part, I didn't really notice. Like, I think that's something where I'll probably have to listen to them, by themselves. But aside from a few that were references to past themes, like I believe the Ellis Highway one was basically a remix of the Makina Village theme.
Yes.
Or I think there was some. Oh right, the first part Cadencia was a remix of Sword Valley, I believe. But for the most part, the music just didn't really stand out to me that much in the field, which was something that, like Xenoblade 1 and 2 both have really, really well-loved field themes, whether they're like Gower Plains or they're more Ardain. And I don't know that this really has that, which was a bit of an odd realization.
No, I agree with you. But again, I think it's kind of related to expectations.
Yes.
Because with Xenoblade 1 and 2, we had that bombastic orchestrations. And in this, I think most of them are really like for a more ambient vibe. I recommend you listening, because I was listening here to the music in Eager Wilderness, which I think is the desert.
Yes.
And when I got to that area, I was okay, let's go more Ardennes. Give me those those high orchestra and stuff like that. And it's like a very, very intimate song. And I was listening here, and it's a beautiful arrangement, but I really didn't got to appreciate while playing the game.
Right.
And I think the experience will be similar hearing a lot of these different songs. And also, a lot of these songs get really good like in by 3 or 2 minutes. It takes a while. Those are they usually have 6 or 8 minutes sometimes. And when you're playing the game, a lot of the time, if you are at the same levels of the monsters, you get interrupted by the battle theme. So
Yeah.
it's a little hard to hear. That's a bit of an issue also.
I guess one thing about the music, because the music in the game is not bad, not at all. But
yeah.
one thing in particular was the special hero battle themes. I don't know if you got to listen to those, the ones for Nia and Melia specifically.
They are so good.
Oh,
I like
they're
them.
so good. I think it's funny. Melia's is just they took the jazzy battle theme and made it jazzier.
I would say exactly that. I don't know how, but I think in the moment that it started, I was, oh my god.
Yeah. And
they're going hard.
And it's funny because I heard that one first, and then I heard Nia's. And Nia's at first, I wasn't sure exactly what it was, because it takes a little bit to pick up. But then you realize it's the Drifting Soul Battle remix, and it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. It's such a good song.
Man, what a good timeline to live on. Yes, I got to see the Nia one first, and I think I almost immediately I noticed, oh my god, is this Drifting Souls?
It's so good.
Actually, in this game, Drifting Souls is called Nia's theme, if you
Yes.
see on the OST. So yeah, it's actually her song, and yeah, both of them are amazing. I think I like a little bit more the Melia one, but Nia is just such an unexpected turn of events to see another remix of Drifting Souls in this game.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually like Nia's better because I like the Bionis arm, Bionis shoulder, Bionis elbow. I
Bionis
forget what the name
shoulder.
is. Shoulder,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the jazzy thing, but I feel like for the most part, it's basically just Bionis shoulder 1.5. Whereas Nia's theme is like something completely new, because it's taking Drifting Soul and remixing it in a way that it, was never really played before, and I think that's really cool. And it came out really well.
for sure. No, I agree. Both are really great. Nice touches, and I think it's just that final fun service that I really wanted to see in this game.
Yeah, that was really nice, especially because after seeing how Xenoblade 2 did it, it was basically just for certain blades you had the past themes, like for Elma you had Uncontrollable play when fighting UMs.
Right.
And
right.
You had You All Know Our Names for Shulk and Fiora. So you could have expected it to be just that, just literally the past music, but no, they actually made brand new compositions. That's really awesome.
No, that was super awesome. And just because I was here on YouTube and I was watching like the best moments on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and there's this side quest it's the Ascension quest for Xeon on Colony 9, and Kite is in love with Juniper, and it's so funny. I was just watching rewatching the scene here. There's a lot of nice moments in some of the hero quests, and I think I like them a little bit more when there's some a little bit more funny moments, because in the actual story of this game, I think it's way more mature than the past Xenoblades. So we didn't have like a scene like Zeke, a character like Zeke from Xenoblade 2. Or even some of these moments with Nia and stuff like that. So it was nice to get also those moments in the hero
Yeah, that
quests.
scene with Kite especially is probably the most, anime-y one.
Yeah, for sure.
Approach.
I mean, every time Gondor was on screen calling her mother Beach Queen, I couldn't... I never took it serious.
The fact that that's what it was in the affinity chart was like, oh...
And also, it felt so nice in the Senna's side story, because Condor was calling her mother. I was like, oh.
Yeah, that's nice.
She actually likes her.
Yeah. I think in general, the swearing in the game is really nicely done. Where you have most of the time it's, like cultural swears, like snuffing and spark. Which I think makes sense given like the limited lifespan and what they're personally invested in. That you would have those kinds of words used. I really like that. It feels appropriate, But then you have moments where when stuff gets real and they use actual swears, the fact they do that really makes it feel more intense. Like,
Right.
I think they call Dee a shitbag when they're at the Cloud Keep after he kills Nia, or after M dies and Noah's fighting N, and start talking about how, like, he tried over and over and he couldn't find any other way to make M survive, and Noah says, you're full of shit.
I remember that.
You didn't try, you're just a coward. It feels way more impactful.
Yeah. It was funny because when he said that he tried, I imagine exactly the same thing. He never tried. He goes through the other routes. So when he said, no, you're full of shit, I was like, exactly that. No.
It's really nicely done.
There are some big moments. I mean, going back to Gondor, there's this moment where she calls Shania a bitch, and it's very well deserved.
Yes.
And there's always, when she comes back from the city and she's like, guess who's back, bitches?
Yeah. Yuni has some great ones too, like when talking about going through the river to try and escape the castle, she's like, water again? Ugh. Feathers are a bitch to dry. It's like...
Exactly. No, Uni is perfect.
Yes.
The whole thing with keeping with all the British slang and stuff like that in the game, I don't know. I just think it fits really well on Xenoblade, and I like to see all these characters. I can't even imagine Uni speaking in another way. Like, it seems like her character was exactly perfect for that.
When Uni and Lan start calling each other Muppets and Spoons, it's great.
People are making memes with Uni because when you change the character to her, she says like, "Yes,
Uni's the best."
Yeah, overall, just really great. I mean, it's like the voice acting is not only good because of the emotional moments, but they really capture the energy of these characters fantastically well. I mean, every single one of them, Tyon, Senna, Mio, they speak exactly in the way that you expect them. And even the voice acting for Nia and Melia, they came back to their characters perfectly. I think Melia here is more in her character than in Future Connected, to be honest. I think here she sounds more like Melia.
I think it also makes sense for Melia because her voice in Future Connected was... It was a lot older for the character because, you know, it was recorded 10 years later compared to the original. And that's a little weird for Future Connected, which takes place, like, what? Do we even know how long it takes place after the first game? Like, a year or two?
Yeah, something like that. It's not a lot.
Yeah, but
the characters still look the same.
Yeah, here Melia is genuinely an adult. She's a lot older, so the kind of more mature voice actually fits a lot better. So it actually works out really well.
True. That's probably why I thought it felt a little better. But overall, they really fit the characters, and I think they actually took care of the direction. I think at least in the scenes that you can see that they use motion capture, they probably saw the scenes to get a feeling of what was actually happening, because the way that they managed to get the motions exactly right is astounding. And I would say that in some of the dialogues it can feel a little bit weird in some of the hero quests and stuff like that, but overall, as expected from a normal localization. I'm super happy that I've played in English, because Xenoblade 2 I played in Japanese for the first time, but on this one I tried to go on English. I was more positive about the trailers, and I did not regret it.
Yeah, it was just a really good job, honestly. Like, there's only a handful of moments that are awkward, and they're never at important story moments.
Exactly, that's the most
which was the problem with 2, is like, even if only like 5% of the dialogue was bad, it was bad in the moments where it really should not have been. But,
exactly.
Yeah, but here it's great. Like, the accents are great, the characters are great, like
the shouts are great.
There's like, I don't really have any real complaints about the voice acting.
Me neither.
I think they did the best that they could. Great to say.
Yeah. No, for sure. And yeah, I think overall, I mean, it's hard to, because here's the thing, it's hard sometimes when it has so much expectations that a game actually meets your expectations. But the funny thing here is that in some things this game surpassed my expectations, and in others it didn't meet my expectations. So it's a very weird feeling, and I don't even know how to position it, because right at the end I will ask us to position our ranking. If I should say, if I should have to say, to be honest, I would say that I love each one of the Xeno games for different reasons. So it's very hard to rank them. Xenoblade 3 has a lot of things that we never had on Xenoblade 1 or Xenoblade 2, some raw emotional moments, some more serious tones and themes. But at the same time, it lacked some of the most action and bombastic and plot twists of 1 and 2. So it's hard to get an overall opinion. I think that for me personally, only for me personally, Xenoblade 2 still is my favorite game overall, my favorite experience. But Xenoblade 3 for me is probably better than 1, so I would put my ranking like Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 3, and then Xenoblade 1. But like, it really doesn't mean nothing because I love those 3 games really, really closely. So now putting you on the spot, your list, how, if you had to do a list, how would you put it?
I think I would probably end up the opposite to you. Which is funny. I mean, Xenoblade 1 was my first game, which obviously means, like, you know, I'm going to have favoritism towards it. I am not a good critic of Xenoblade 1 because to me that the game is almost perfect. Like, there is not a whole lot that I personally would change based on how I first experienced it. Which obviously the game is not without flaws, but to me it's just a really solid experience the entire time. Xenoblade 3...
But it is, right? It is undeniable that it is very solid. Even if you have some issues, they are usually small with Xenoblade 1.
Right. Xenoblade 3, like you said, there's some matter of like expectations in terms of like, man, I do wish this tied into the other 2 games a little bit more, or I wish it did a bit more with the villain. I wish the last part of the story felt a little bit more cohesive. Like, I wish it didn't feel as rushed, but at the same time, like, so much of this game is the best that the series has ever had. It has the best, you know, the best scenes of the entire series, like the best story moments. It has the best main cast. To me, it has the best combat. So I still would have to put it in second place. And then 2,
right.
I mean, I love 2. 2 is a great game, but I think it ends up having more problems than the other 2 for me. Just in terms of how it's structured, its mechanics, just a little bit in terms of its polish, arguably its character designs, its voice acting. It's still a great game, and I still think the climax of 2 is stronger than the climax of 3, at least in terms of setting up, like, you know, the whole Klaus experiment thing. But I would still probably put it third. So it would go 1, 3, and then 2. And then X, I guess, is forgotten forever.
No, I think that's completely fair, to be honest. In essence, we are basically on the same opinion on 3, right? Because your favorite was always 1, my favorite was always 2, and we both decided to put 3 right in the middle. So it's basically because it's that mixed feeling that I had with 3 of loving the game, but at the same time, it not reaching some of the heights that I expected to reach.
Yeah.
And
I think it's also a matter of, like, the parts where it's sort of disappointed were at the very end, which, like, if what had been a little bit disappointing was maybe halfway through at the start, that'd be one thing, but the fact that it's at the end kind of does leave you with a little bit of a sour impression in that. Even if the ending itself ended up being a good self-contained ending, you still have that impression of, like, okay, but, like, I also wanted this, or this could have been done better.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think, because I was thinking, like, so in Xenoblade 1, we had this moment right by the end where Zanza appeared and everything crazy happens, similar to the chapter 5 and 6 on Xenoblade 3. But I think the biggest difference is that by the end of chapters 5 and 6 on 3, the conflict kind of resolves. Noah kind of defeats N. We technically still had Z, but you won the battle in that moment. In that
and Mia lives.
Moment.
Like, the big conflict of Mia living is resolved. So at this point, it's kind of just like cleaning up.
And with Xenoblade 1, no. Shulk's still technically dead. He still has to get the Monado. And Zanza is still alive, so you have to defeat him. And it feels like there's a lot of stuff to happen still, even though the biggest moment in Xenoblade 1 is the moment that Zanza appears. That's still the big climax, but the ending still is very satisfying because there's stuff to happen and you want to see the conclusion. And you got to see the plot twist with Zanza where he's a scientist, and that in itself is great. So I think that's what lacked in the ending of Xenoblade 3, because the only thing that was left was Zed. And he barely was a threat if you stop to think about it, because he could see the party at all times, but he almost never did actually something. I think he only did when they actually arrived there to battle him. So yeah,
I agree. I also think it's a little... I was very surprised that we never got, like, any big final form for the Ouroboros, because I was so sure that that's what it was going to lead into. That we were going to get, like... Because you even have the whole thing with O and P where their two Mobius forms fuse, and then you learn that's what like, the Mobius do. And it's like, oh, it's so obvious that they're going to have like a Mega Ouroboros that fights Zed. They're all going to fuse, and it's like, nope.
You know, there's this moment when Mio reveals that she's right before Mio reveals that she's Mobius, and she changes places with him and all that, and you have to fight Noah. And up to this point, they were unable to interlink because X had done this stuff, and they are able to finally interlink. But the music and the way that it played out, I thought that was going to be a different form of Ouroboros at the moment, like with stuff from Agnes and Kevis, because like there was an Ouroboros form for each one of them, but we never seen both of them combined. So at least that's I thought it was going to happen, but no.
Yeah, it's also really funny that we never saw like N or M's Ouroboros, because that was also like really expecting N to have like an evil Noah form of the Ouroboros, but nope.
There's even one moment when Noah says he's not even transforming.
Yeah.
So it was kind of... But this is clearly rushed to me, because if you look back at the final battle with N in Origin, you simply battle him 2 times with exactly the same form.
I do think I think it's funny that the that battle in Origin, N has the... Like, his sword is, like... I think the way the
Origin
game,
sword.
Yeah, the way the game distinguishes it is that, like, Lucky 7's normal form is the Sword of the End, and then the form when he pulls it out of his Ouroboros is the Sword of Origin. And in that moment, Noah, or N, has the Sword of Origin and not the Sword of the End. And that's not really addressed.
He's just there with the sword.
Yep.
No
it's like, hey,
explanation.
he got an upgrade somehow.
That scene was a little bit weird to me, because they are like, this is a big moment, because N will make the transition from a bad guy to a good guy. And I think the scene builds up well. We have the emotional dialogue, and then poof, he disappeared. It felt a little anticlimactic to me, and maybe it is what gives that rush nature that we see in this game, probably, that by the end they had to go through of the schedule or something like that.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of neat, the like the fused eyes that they have, Noah and Neo have. It's also kind of neat because if you look at the special edition of the game has like this artwork of the party and like a new, they're in like different poses, and they have this like sort of symbol in the background. And I looked at that before release, and I noticed like, oh, it's kind of funny because it kind of looks like a yin and yang, where it's like a circle with the heads at the top and bottom. There's also a line in between, and I was wondering what that was, because it kind of just looked like kind of neat aesthetic thing. Maybe it's yin and yang because it's supposed to be like Agnes and Kevis, and they team up and they're like two opposites. But no, that's actually the symbol that Noah and Mio have in their eye when they're half Ouroboros and half Mobius.
Whoa, that's interesting. I never saw that symbol before. I remember seeing on them and found it really interesting how they managed to make those two signs combine and stuff like that. But it brings that idea that everyone has Mobius inside also, right? That they start to talk about it by the end, and I don't know, I get the feeling it wasn't super clear to me exactly how that worked, but I can kind of understand the concept.
Yeah, it felt like they could have had a little bit more establishing, because it does kind of come out of nowhere. And like the whole thing, again, the whole thing with Zed being, collective representation of despair, and how they all have like a bit of Mobius because they all have like some fear in them, is fine. It's just not done super well, because they try and throw in other stuff like Zed still having a personality and being all evil and whatnot, and like it just ends up not working as well as it could have.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, this is not the first time that I'm thinking about the final boss of Xenogears, and it's a little bit similar, but It's that another thing that happens with some JRPGs, that a bad guy appear at the last moment and he is the real bad guy.
I mean, that's kind of what Zanza is, right? Like, Zanza is foreshadowed, but it's kind of a similar trope if you just look at it, you know, without context.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things why we love Zanza is like external to writing, like the VA, the how he looks and stuff like that. It's just such a crazy the plot twist that is related to him and not the actual character.
Yeah.
But I think he works. I understand why people say that he's not a great villain, but I think in the sense of the story he works completely perfect. And if that was even something a little bit similar to that, he would be a little bit better. I think I don't know a lot of stuff to say still. Do you have anything in mind?
One last thing I was thinking about in terms of just stuff. If we're going to talk about other stuff the game set up but never super delivered on, the fog was a relatively big one. Because I still don't entirely know what to think about that, and more specifically, like how it relates to Future Connected. Because like this game did not end up having any fog beasts or any like fog king or whatnot, but still had a lot of fog, and the fog was sort of important.
I think I was even thinking about it, and because of course the fog appears on Future Connected, that's why when we saw the fog we were like, okay, that will be important here. And I think the fog is a sign of the worlds coming together.
Yeah.
So I would interpret it like that. So we see it in Future Connected because it's like the start of those two universes starting to want to connect with each other, and the fog is probably a byproduct of that.
Yeah, and that would be why the Fog King has the same model as a Goldo in Xenoblade 2, is I guess because when the intersection started happening, like somehow a Goldo from Xenoblade 2 made its way into the world of Xenoblade 1, and it somehow got powered up by the fog because ether? But yeah, I guess the portal would have been like, this is sort of like an intersection that's starting to destroy things, and that's why you have to shut it down. It's still a little odd. I mean, the fog...
No, it's serious.
Again, this is a matter of, like, you know, self-contained story, because the fog, when you just look at it in the context of Xenoblade 3, is fine, right? Like, it's a thing in the world where the fog is, there's an annihilation event, and that's basically all you really need to know about it. It's only when you look at it in the context of, like, what does this mean for Future Connected, that it starts becoming like, well, maybe there's, like, other stuff we need to kind of figure out with it, but yeah.
I think someone told Takahashi that the scene where Klaus explained the whole world in Xenoblade 2 was really bad, and then he was like, I'm not going to do exposition anymore. Because I think I missed a scene like that. Probably the scene where Nia is explaining everything would be something comparable to that, but it was not as deep.
Yeah, it felt
because
different.
I remember it was so fascinating to me on Xenoblade 2 because it was like a god explaining how he created the worlds, and for a soft sci-fi like Xenoblade, it actually made sense, a lot of the concepts and the stuff that he explains. So yeah, I was hoping to see something like that.
It was also just like genuine answers and plot twists, right? Because we had no idea at that point, like, what a blade was, how, you know, the blades came to exist. I mean, we had literally just learned at the start of, well, I guess maybe not at the start of that chapter, but like not that long ago, that this used to be another world, right? Like, the whole thing with it being Earth, and which is already a plot twist, and suddenly you throw in like the whole, hey, I created everything, I made sure that a new ecosystem would exist, and it provides genuine explanation. Whereas I think, like we've mentioned, in Xenoblade 3, it's mostly stuff that we kind of already figured. There's not a whole bunch of brand new revelations here. Like, I guess we learn where Lucky 7 and the Ouroboros Stone comes from, sort of, in a kind of like, I made this, which, how? But, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things are unanswered. I think the DLC will probably answer some of that. I don't know how, but I think it will.
Yeah, I guess that's a question, like, what do you think the DLC will cover?
I'm more on the line of waiting for an epilogue, but I really don't know how that will work. Because one of the issues that I had was it's not an issue actually, just a personal desire. We saw a lot of the Kevis side. I think Kevis was more of the protagonist of this game. Like, we never saw the world of Agnes in the like the first cutscene that we see Noah. We never saw that side of Agnes, where Mio is, how she's doing, and to me that seems to imply that we are going to see that in the future in a DLC or something like that. But at the same time, it just seems like the founders are such a perfect concept for a video game. There are 6 characters, the 7th one who could be a hero.
Yeah.
So it just feels like they are there to be playable characters. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's an odd thing, especially because you see the Aegis Sword and the Monado Rex. It's, how are they going to tie that in? Like, the Monado Rex does exist in Ionios because it's in Melia's room, but you don't really have an Aegis Sword, and we also don't know if Rex or Pyro are here at all. In fact, the Aegises are completely absent. We don't see Alvis, Pyro, or Mithra at all in this world. Aside from the one photo, they're not even, like, referenced. So...
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it. I originally had the thought of, like, Torna covered the past, and Future Connected covered, the future, obviously. So maybe this side story would cover something that happens concurrently with the game's main events. But that doesn't really make sense now that we know the story and we know that, hey, both worlds were kind of just turned into Ionios. There's nothing happening outside of it. So... And if it's like an epilogue, like, I don't know how we tie Rex and Shulk into it, because the 2 worlds are separate. So unless we bring them back together in the epilogue, like...
That's my hope.
There's a lot we don't know at this point, and I mean, that means there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, because here's the thing, if the worlds are separated, how they are going to tell that story, right? That's the weird part of it. Yeah, a lot of questions to be answered, but I think Takahashi has a plan. It has to be something like
he has
to keep
so
us...
many plans.
Because if you look at Torna, like, it was something planned to be part of the main game, right? So it was kind of an incidental DLC, was not actually planned from the beginning, but it kind of was the best way out. And here, I would imagine that because Torna was a success, he made the game already thinking about a DLC, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm probably wondering that a lot of unanswered stuff will be on the DLC. And I understand if people are going to be mad about that. Yeah, it makes sense to be a little mad. If a lot of the main answers that we are expecting are going to be on the DLC and you pay the full game and not get everything else. Even though, talking about content, the game has a lot of content. But I can understand that. But yeah, we have to wait until next year, probably.
Yep. End of next year, I think, is the deadline we have.
Yes. At least we have more stuff to look forward in the near future. We don't have to wait for Xenoblade 4 to be excited again. Yeah, and that's another question. Do you think it's Xenoblade 4? It's Xenoblade X2? It's something completely new? It's hard to imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Like, which is also funny because this is kind of the same thing we would have thought after Xenoblade 2. Like, what exactly is going to happen? And, I mean, at the very least, if that theory about the 2 worlds now being in the same kind of universe is correct, that does leave that avenue open to explore if we do have, another Xenoblade set in the same world. I don't know, right? Like, X still really needs answers, and I don't know when we're going to get any for it.
It is kind of similar to X in the sense that the story does not give a lot of answers, right? It is not the first time that Takahashi has made something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, this game still, it gives you closure for the main story and characters.
For sure.
Whereas X just, like, slaps you in the face, is like, no, you know nothing. Good day, sir.
Oh my god, yeah, it's exactly that. But overall, I think it's we have hopes for the future. It was a great game. Monolith Soft is a great developer. I still look very much forward to what they're going to develop in the future. And I think we'll probably hear something about Xenoblade. We'll probably hear something about Breath of the Wild 2 being a problem to the team. Like half of the team was with Breath of the Wild 2 or something along those lines. But overall, I think this is... Nothing can take the fact that this is a great game, this is a great experience, and I'm really happy with it. Criticisms aside, I'm pretty happy with what we received. I'm pretty happy that we have 3 Xenoblades in the same console. And I wholeheartedly recommend this series to anyone who likes a great JRPG.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like, the big thing to keep in mind is we did provide a decent amount of criticisms here, especially about the ending. But it's also because, you know, we really love the series and this game.
Exactly. Yes. I think we are not criticizing because we just want to shit on those games or stuff like that. I think it's just because we really like the series and we have those specific expectations and we know about Monolith Soft and about the game. So it's only fair. And I think the Xenoblade community is not one to shy away from criticism. Xenoblade 2 had a lot of issues also. And I see people also criticize Xenoblade 1. None of those games are perfect. We all know that. As no game it is, but the thing is that the good stuff in this game is really, 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 really good. At the end of the day, that's what counts. Anyway, guys, I think that was basically it. So 3 hours of conversation about Xenoblade 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll put some timestamps to help you out if you just want to know about the story, about the heroes or stuff like that. But I hope you all can enjoy this conversation from 2 Xenoblade fans about the Xenoblade 3. And maybe in the future we'll be back here, maybe with more ideas, maybe talking about the DLC, maybe talking about trailer. But if you want to know more about Xenoblade, just keep an eye out on the Nintendo Everything channel, because as long as I'm here, a lot of Xenoblade content will be here. Actually, I'm planning... I have to do a Xenoblade review, but man, it'll give me a lot of... Because I have to talk about the bad stuff, about the good stuff. It has to be a very complex video, but I'm planning to do something like that. So if you enjoy that kind of content, keep an eye out on the channel, subscribe, leave a like, and all that stuff. So that's it, guys. Until the next time, bye!